There and back again. A Hobbit's Tale by Bilbo Baggins.
The Lord of the Rings trilogy continues to be one of the most genuinely impressive feats of modern popular cinema ever attempted and completed. And like the Hobbits punching way above their weight class in the Battle for Middle-earth, Peter Jackson may have been an unexpected figure to pull the feat off. We have talked about multiple early movies that Peter Jackson wrote and directed. From his splatter phase, we talked about his 1992 zombie comedy Brain Dead, which enraged some New Zealanders by using public money to make such an excessively gross zombie film.
To assess the gravity of the loss, we went to see the Commission's latest project, a film the Commission is funding to the tune of pretty much $2.5 million. In a way, this film is the sort of thing the government has decided to discard.
Good. Great, thank you. Fantastic.
Brain Dead is the title. It's what's known as a splatter movie, a movie about zombies.
All of Peter Jackson's early work was done on a fairly small budget, with help mostly from the New Zealand Film Commission. And in 1994, we've talked about Heavenly Creatures, a very beautiful and somewhat conceptual biopic about the Parker Hume murder. In order to do the more abstract parts of Heavenly Creatures, Peter Jackson founded Weta Digital, a visual effects company.
Started on Weta Digital Heavenly Creatures with one silicon graphics computer, one single box. I think we actually still have it, and I think we it's a doorstop now. I think we use it to keep the door open. We've sort of got a memorial doorstop. But that one's so bloody expensive, and it took us forever to save up and buy it. And it was like, that was one computer in Heavenly Creatures, and now we've got probably 6,000 or 7,000 computers probably. It's got a little bit bigger.
Along with Richard Taylor and Jamie Selkirk, who would go on to work on The Lord of the Rings. It was Heavenly Creatures that gave Peter Jackson and his partner and co-writer Fran Walsh the ability to make their first big-budget Hollywood blockbuster.
That's absolutely not Orson Welles! The most hideous man alive!
The Frighteners in 1996, starring Michael J. Fox, Trini Alvarado, Peter Dobson, and John Ashton. Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh had been hired by Robert Zemeckis as writers, and Peter Jackson ended up getting to direct, impressing everyone at Universal. It was originally slated to be a spin-off of Tales from the Crypt, but became its own universe. However, the Frighteners' budget was only $26 million. For Peter Jackson's next project, he'd be given 10 times that over 3 years. Peter Jackson's next project was supposed to be King Kong, but for the moment that fell through since Godzilla and Mighty Joe Young were set to come out already. Remember when Hollywood worried about making too many of the same films at the same time? I missed that. In 1997, Peter Jackson entered negotiations with Saul Zaentz to win the rights for J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings trilogy. Zaentz had them from when he and Ralph Bakshi did the rotoscoped Lord of the Rings film in 1978. One of the things that made the trilogy such an impressive feat, and it wasn't always set to be a trilogy, Peter Jackson was pressured to turn it into 2 and then even 1 film, is that it was shot consecutively. The principal photography for the trilogy began October 11th, 1999, and ended December 22nd, 2000. From there, pickup shots were done every year from 2001 to 2004 to get anything they had missed. Most of the filming was done within New Zealand's national parks and conservation areas. as well as sound stages in Wellington and Queenstown. Post-production was also done pretty much consecutively, with each film getting a year before the next film was set to be released.
Tops has been like 500,000 feet of film. We're getting avid storage, we're getting 1.5 terabytes of storage set up and 6 avids hooked together. Okay. Just gearing up for the biggest thing any of us have ever seen.
The size of the project was quite amazing. The amount of footage that was turned over through the cutting room was nothing I'd ever seen before.
Normally we'd have a ratio of 12 or 15 to 1, but on this I think we end up about 150 to 1, so that's a lot of film.
Some stages we had like 7 and 8 units out shooting, all producing footage.
How many units have we got? I've lost count.
A big part of what made this entire thing, well, possible, but also so groundbreaking, was the extensive use of motion capture with Weta Digital, advancing the technology farther than it ever had been before.
I hate you. I hate you. Where would you be without me? Ellen, I saved us.
Motion capture was most often used with characters like Gollum, who were on 2 legs and had motion that could be captured from the movements of an actor. One of the biggest innovations in animation and visual effects was the massive software package. Developed for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, it allowed the generation of crowd sequences for battles.
The great thing with the technology that we devised over the years is that we were able to make continual improvements to it, and obviously the massive software that was written for Lord of the Rings was a good case, because we wrote this to enable us to have these computer-generated armies which would behave naturally and look natural and not look like they were replicated bits of computer programming.
The cast of all these films was huge, with each film adding entire populated areas of Middle-earth. By the time you have Return of the King, you have characters from the Shire, Rivendell, Lothlorien, Rohan, Gondor, Isengard, and of course Mordor. I'm not even going to try to recite the entire cast, but the main Fellowship members alone were Elijah Wood, Sean Ashton, Ian McKellen, Viggo Mortensen, Orlando Bloom, John Rhys-Davies, Sean Bean, Billy Boyd, and Dominic Moynihan. 4 hobbits, 2 men, an elf, a dwarf, and a wizard. The overall budget for all 3 films was $281 million. After Miramax bought the rights and Harvey Weinstein tried to push them all into one film, Peter Jackson pushed Weinstein into allowing another company, New Line, to buy it. $281 million is still an impressively small amount, considering the later Hobbit trilogy would cost $623 million. The films made $2.9 billion at the box office. Fellowship of the Ring came out in December 2001, The Two Towers December 2002, Return of the King December 2003. In 2004, The Return of the King swept the Oscars, taking home 11 awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Editing, Best Makeup, Best Original Score, Best Original Song, and Best Visual Effects.
Good knuckles for 8.
And Rohan will answer.
Anyway, before I introduce the panel, please like this video and subscribe to the Movie Night Extravaganza YouTube channel. Hit that bell to get notified whenever we're streaming. Also, we are now monetized, so if you have any pressing questions during this live stream, send us a super chat, which helps me keep the show running, and which I am obligated by international law, human rights law, to answer. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Movie Night Extra. All of our after parties are on there forever. We also have a new Discord and a Letterboxd HQ account, so those are 2 more places to follow along with us. Links are in the description. Okay, let me introduce the panel. Conan Neutron, host of Protonic Reversal, co-host of Movie Night Extravaganza, and frontman for Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends, neutronfriends.bandcamp.com. J. Andrew World, illustrator, book cover artist, artist for Give Them an Argument, co-host for Movie Night Extravaganza, and Bad Takes. KT Baldassaro is an actress, director, and writer who wrote and co-directed and also starred in Girl in the Basement, along with appearing in quite a few horror movies. You can also catch her voice acting in a scripted podcast series, The Starwell Foundation, an audio drama set in the City of Superheroes, wherever podcasts are listened to, and her new film podcast, What If I Don't Like It? New episodes bi-monthly, as well as on TikTok at Movie Runtime. Mike Morasky is a music composer at Valve, having composed the scores for games like Left 4 Dead and Counter-Strike. Visual effects artist, including the senior massive technical director on the Lord of the Rings trilogy, lead technical director on the Matrix sequels, and he founded the bands Steel Pole Bathtub, Milk Cult, and Duh. I, of course, am your host and one of the hobbits who didn't leave the Shire of any adventures, Forrest Proudfoot Miller. I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
Nice. We got Duh in there, so I guess he didn't slack on the promos there, Mike.
Still working on that math problem, though. The whole half of you is half as much as you like.
I remember being a little kid and reading Fellowship of the Ring and being like, damn, that bar goes really hard. Like he sneaked dissed the entire his entire community, and like I don't know, the movie does it so well with like their faces are like, wait a second, was that? And then it like jumps back to Bilbo.
It's pretty great, Mike. So good to have you, man. It's so rare. Of course, I've talked to you plenty over the years in Protonic Reversal, my show,
and in person,
yes, and rock and roll kind of ways. But we've talked. You and I even have talked a little about this, and I think it's so fascinating because first of all, I feel like there's a mythos to these films that comes pre-internet as we know it, like social media 2030, whatever you want to call it. But what it came perfectly in time for was DVD extra features. That's for darn sure. And which I still am totally for and love the Criterion Channel, especially for. But this is a dawning of a new era for visual effects, of which the listeners, there's so much stuff to pack in. You worked on those Matrix movies too, the Matrix sequels, which are also no small player in the visual effects category. And then you got out of the game like after that and like a few others. But how did you get started with these Lord of the Rings movies and like you living down there and the whole thing? Because I know a little bit of the history, but I think the listeners would love to hear it.
The story's kind of long, but basically,
so's the podcast.
There was a point at which we were on tour, and we had done a few months with Faith No More, which we were talking about previously, and like when you do months at a time, you get pretty crusty, you know what I mean, and crunchy mentally. And then we like went to Hawaii, and I remember by the end of it, like we basically, it's not like we were fighting, but we weren't really even talking to each other anymore. And then we went back and tried to make a new record, and it kind of really, I just don't think our hearts were in it. And I had been doing some computer stuff at home on my own, like graphics. Which basically, back then there was hardly any graphics packages. I found one was like a crack that was, on AOL. Literally, it was like a crack on AOL that I downloaded and taught myself to do some animation. And a friend who, do you remember Liquid Television, MTV?
Hell
right?
Yeah. Andy and I definitely do. Forrest may be too young. But.
Right. So that was Colossal Pictures, which is in San Francisco. And a lot of our friends, the Bay Area at the time was, the Mission District was a pretty small community of weirdos. And pretty much all the people who worked there would come to our shows. And I knew producers from there and whatnot. And in fact, my ex-wife and I were having dinner. It was kind of after tour, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And we hadn't really stopped playing just yet, but we were, sort of in the throes of not knowing what's going on. And we had some friends over, and the woman happened to be a producer at Colossal. And they had just kind of started to splinter off. They splintered off into a bunch of different smaller animation studios. And there was a new one called Protozoa. And she came in and saw what I was working on in my room. And she was like, "Oh, do you want a job doing that?" Because there was you couldn't go to school for it.
Right.
Software, the computers that really ran the real software were like $250,000, right?
Yeah.
I was just doing it on a PC, and I was
the cracked version you got from AOL, right?
Oh yeah, and I can't remember the software package.
Well, you see that with the Peter Jackson clip where he's talking about how when he went to go buy a computer in '94, right? It was like the most expensive possible thing, and then he's like, "Oh, now he uses a doorstop."
Yeah, that was literally the SGI machine I'm talking about. Yeah, it's like $250,000. So you could even get them more up to $400,000, and mine was a PC. But my response was like, no, I really enjoy this. Like, if I get a job doing it, I'll really ruin it, for me. And then the band really did stop, and I gave her a ring, and she, brought me in, and, my income went from, $15,000 a year if I was lucky to like 60, it was just like, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like I used to like go to a studio and make art all day long and, and
get health insurance.
Health insurance, like
yeah, oh my god,
fucking incredible. Yeah,
the whole like like any kind of editing really, but like I'd imagine especially like VFX stuff, like the idea that getting a job in it will kind of sap you of that like creative energy that you're kind of playing around with is really, it ends up being true at some point though, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean that's how I ended up at Valve eventually, right? Like, but that's like 10 years later or whatever. But yeah, no, I mean, I really believed that back then, and I still think there's a kernel of truth in that. Like the band was like a pure art, like it's pure art, right? There's no, like maybe we're considering like we're making a single because we need rent money, but it wasn't like trying to make a single that would sell.
Right.
That was never a consideration. And I still sort of had that mentality in terms of, like I was really getting into it. But then I kind of also discovered that studio was really cool. And the people, like I'd never, my whole life had been on tour pretty much, really, my whole adult life. And even as a teenager, I worked and played in bars and whatnot. So I didn't really know much about anything other than washing dishes and that kind of thing, some construction work, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was, and that lasted a few years, I want to say, probably 3 or 4, maybe even. And then my life kind of turned upside down a little bit with my personal life. And my friend, so this friend of mine, Bay, who kind of is a thread throughout my life, Bay Rate, who ends up designing Gollum's face, right? And designs like not just his face, but like how it works. It's like a multi-dimensional combinatorial system of polygons, basically, or vertices, more likely. And all. I
was just about to say that, by the way, but yeah.
Also famous because of his aunt and his grandfather John, right? His aunt Bonnie, and he was younger, so I was probably late 20s and he was early 20s at the time. He had left Protozoa, and I was so this was like in the mission. It was kind of the internet bubble 1.0, right? So it was
the pets.com internet bubble is the best way to remember it.
No, exactly.
Where pets.com was somehow a big deal.
We're all going to get rich, and we're making kind of weird cool art. I wish I had kind of prepared. I would show you like some of the crazy shit that we were doing. And he was like really early hire down in New Zealand, working on those films. And he reached out to me and was like, dude, you should come down here. This is amazing. And I was just like, dragons and elves, like just not really my thing, I was still very underground, like kind of,
I'm
like liquid television.
I'm not an elf man myself. Like,
Yeah.
Well, and to place it
yet, like we didn't have Game of Thrones yet, even.
Right. And when I was a huge fan of the books as a kid, I played D&D and all the things.
Yeah, sure.
But this was we were punk and underground, and and
there was no precedent for something along these lines. Like, what is it like? Like I guess you could say like a. What was the Ridley Scott movie with Tom Cruise? We did Legend. Legend, yeah, like Legend and like stuff like that, or like Lady Hawk, which is a much better version. I know you love Lady Hawk, but there was, as far as in the 90s, like it wasn't fantasy. Everything was like cyberpunk, and like like that's where all the action was at.
Right. Like Labyrinth, like Karen Prell is an animator at Valve, and she was like an instrumental, puppeteer, right, doing that sort of stuff. But that was the level of effects, right? And ironically, I'm glad you put Brain Dead on there, because I was like, Peter Jackson. I went and I looked, and I was like, Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles, like what the actual fuck, right? Like that stuff is wild. And I was like, all right, this guy's pretty cool. But then I was like, he's not gonna pull this off.
Can I tell you? I was a huge fan of those movies before he was announced for Lord of the Rings. I was like the guy, right? And it was the video store in Shattuck. It was the one around the corner from the Italian place. And some guy's like, "Oh yeah, you got to check out this movie. It's got like raunchy puppets." I'm like, "That sounds terrible." I'm like, "No, it's amazing." And then I saw
raunchy puppets.
I saw Dead, and then I was like, I'll just check out this one, Dead Alive. That sounds cool, and like, because of course it was Dead Alive in the U.S. And I was like, oh my god, this is like the best movie I've ever seen. It was firmly down the line for me. But what I'm getting at is that, and I talked about this, and actually that episode is the first time, KT, that you were on the show, I think, if I remember correctly, right? The Dead Alive, Brain Dead episode.
Yeah.
And we covered Heavenly Creatures.
I had to go back and check whether we did Delicatessen or Brain Dead first, but we did Brain Dead first.
We did Brain Dead first. Heavenly Creatures, I loved, and it was such a like different kind of movie, and I was like, oh wow, this is like really cool and really interesting,
so beautiful.
And there's no lawnmowers with zombies at all. Like it's
well, and that's the funny thing, right? Is that it was the lawnmowers with the zombies that sold me. And then I was like, oh, he's not going to be able to pull this off. And then I saw Heavenly Creatures and Frighteners, and I was like,
Frighteners,
oh. And Frighteners was the one I was like, oh, I'm in. Like, and so I called the Bay, and then he hooked me up with John Shields and the people who were producing it, and it kind of was a pretty quick.
Well, the crazy thing about Frighteners that I found when I was like looking up the intro or whatever. So it's $26 million they give him. They give Peter Jackson to do Frighteners, which is literally 10% of what the entire trilogy of Lord of the Rings would, inevitably be. $280 million. So it's like they gave him 1/10 of the amount of money that they would have, that they would have to give him over the next 5 years to complete this. And it's like that's an insane jump. I believe in you enough. I'll give you 10 times what you've ever had for.
Real quick, the only corollary I can think of is when they gave Sam Raimi all that money for Spider-Man, because I was like, what, Sam Raimi? Really?
Yes.
Like, and it's a big budget movie? Like, I can't imagine what that's even going to look like. That's crazy. But I bet it's going to be cool,
I thought the same thing.
Let's see, I'm looking up. There is a really good corollary, actually, and I'm trying to remember what it's called. Hold on. Sorry, did you ever see Bound?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Right?
Pre-Matrix.
So Bound was literally the same thing. They gave them a certain amount of money. What can you do with it? And then they made a great film, and they went, all right, here's a whole bunch of money.
Here's half the GDP of a couple countries.
Right.
Well, and the thing with the Frighteners, when you go and look at like the reviews for people all the time, they're like, this feels like a screener for a bigger project. Like this feels like, a studio gave Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, gave them money to do something, with something bigger in mind. And so I don't really know how to judge. Like multiple reviews online say that from the time, and it's like,
because there's
know that fucking it was going to be Lord of the Rings. It was going to be 10 times that much money in New Zealand, going crazy over the whole entire country. Like,
if you look at that one, the dark kind of ghosty Roby figure, it's been a while since I've seen that film, but like there's a direct line between that and the Nazgul, like a direct line, right? Yeah. So. It's sort of I could see where that would like light the fire. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to.
And before we get too far away from this, I did want to ask if anything from music you were able to bring into doing graphics.
That's God. I get asked that kind of question a lot, just because I do shift between. I've shifted it through my life through a lot of different modes. I bring there's like a product at that time for me. Now I have all kinds of theories on it, but at that time it was mostly just the DIY thing. There were when working in visual effects and film, I've met a lot of people who've never had another job, and there's a not like a lack of street smarts sometimes, not always. Sometimes some people are really utterly cunning and dastardly, but that there's sort of like there was this street smarts from touring and playing in bands. I mean, I played in bars when I was a teenager, and that thing of just like, we're gonna do this and we're gonna get it done and we're gonna make it good enough, right? And that goes through everything. Like that's like a and then there were times, probably my most successful early, I've never been very good at walking into a place with hubris. I'm usually going like, oh my God, how did I get here? This is crazy. And of course you have to prove yourself. Like I came in third guy on the massive team, and, immediately kind of just got buried in learning it and kind of figuring out how to make it interesting and all the mocap stuff, 'cause I had done a ton of that. but it was the first thing was I just put together a shot. It was Helm's Deep, and it's kind of like just a prep scene. Like they're all kind of, it's not war. It's just like they're all hanging out. And I just set up a scene, and it has cadence, and it felt like a little piece of music, right? Like, and everyone flipped out. It was just like, holy shit, look at what he did. Like Massive can work, you know?
Yeah.
And all it was is
they were developing it as
it was a proof of concept almost.
It was all
Like,
just
as-
tech. It
as
was tech.
Yeah,
You know, like, can we get them to walk on surfaces? Can we get them to not walk through each other? Can we, all those things? And so I think that was, it's just that creative
hits the
thing.
wall and just keeps going, you know, like
there's so many.
Get stuck in the corner. Yeah.
It's very much like video games, you know, in that way, obviously. Yeah.
But I think it like at the time, I'm sure you weren't thinking about it being, this is going to be the gold standard of like any sort of like, you know, the swords and shields sort of movie that like you're going to be like, all right, it doesn't look like it's Helm's Deep though. You know, like
I saw a post where you had the screenplay or something like signed, or like no, it was something. It was like to you know, the screener or whatever. And I saw that you were like, yeah, we didn't know that anything was gonna happen with this. It was just kind of shrug, like, oh, you know, we'll see what happens. And then
so Forrest brings up a good point here. And like, so what did you think at the time? And I don't want to, you know, we're the path to getting there, like, you know, it's as long as the fellowship itself.
That's it. So basically, like, they were like, yup, I did some paperwork. They rented me a house. I got an airplane with my girlfriend, and we went to New Zealand.
Off to go to New Zealand.
Yeah. You know,
and you're like, all right, this guy who did like, you know, this wild zombie movie and Frighteners, he's making these things into a movie. Did you think like did you think he was gonna pull it off?
I wouldn't have gotten on the plane if I didn't think it was going to be cool. And that was where the Feebles, you know, meets Heavenly Creatures. Like that worked for my sensibility. I was like, oh right, okay, like cool. And I had my friend Bay down there going like, the shit's amazing, you know, like because they also have all the practical stuff too, right? Like that was my favorite thing, is to go walk over to the bigatures, you know, they're these massive, you know, like
miniature plus big. Got it.
Yeah, you know, they're like miniatures, and then they all these Mocon cameras that are, you know, taking images that match the digital layouts and all that stuff. And then there's the practicals. Like you go through the shop and it's like, you know, like your wall with the swords, but it's just racks of swords and racks of leather gear. And, you know, like Richard Taylor's just crazy genius because they came from that practical background. Right. So I was all in at that point. Like
you can see like the technology, like the, you know, the CGI type stuff. And I know that they developed like what they were calling like digital makeup with the motion capture stuff almost. Like you can see that improving in real time when you watch you know, the three movies back to back, which is what I you know, I did this weekend. Like you can see it go from, I mean, Fellowship of the Ring, classic, but you know, the graphic kind of stuff in it not as like dazzling as it would be in like Return of the King, when they have like, you know, the greatest, largest battle scene that you'll ever see in like anything, and everyone's just kind of getting stomped by the Oliphants or whatever. Like the difference between that and, you know, even like the Nazgul kind of stabbing Frodo and Fellowship of the Ring, you're like, yeah, there's like the marked difference, like, but it's not something you notice at the time. Like I remember being a kid and watching these and being like, oh, this is the coolest, like this is the height of technology, and it's like each time it got more and more stunning, and it's like, oh, this is the height of technology, like it can't get better than this. Like
but the use of the practical effects like totally saves it for a time. Like there's parts in Helm's Deep where it could be maybe too much CGI, but it cuts to practical close, and the back and the forth, like I really enjoyed that tempo. That makes it hold up for me now viewing it.
Yeah,
I miss that sensibility, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a lot of it's married together because of those Mocon cameras, right? Like I said, when I did the Helm's Deep shot I was talking about, I just had some footage, right? And it was like, oh, here's some footage, and I had the model, and I had the camera motion, and so I could work in the digital world and just like set it all up, lay it all out, and then render it without the digital model, and then just composite it into the footage that was on the server, you know. And so like we all got pretty adept at doing the whole package, right? Like going from nothing to a footage you could watch, and it was real, and it was a bigature, you know, camera pass on Helm's Deep or whatever. And that was I think that combination of real footage with the like what you're saying essentially,
I remember watching the Two
parcel,
Towers
yeah.
DVD when it first, like, well, within the amount of time that it first came out. And I remember watching the special features when I, like, literally in like 2002 or 2003 or something.
Which is like hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
Of, again, the classic era of special features.
And I remember being blown away by the Iroquois, like that whole sequence where they're all doing the battle for Isengard. Like that whole sequence, I remember seeing these guys that were just fully made up in like the Iroquois, like costuming with the the face like coverings and everything, and being like, holy shit. And then of course that's where the I'd assume the massive comes in, because then you can kind of replicate all of those times a million. But like the amount of people that they actually had on set doing the practical side of it was like, Jesus Christ. And like it must be crazy to go on set for a day and be one of those guys, and you're like, I look terrifying, but like, like you gotta take like pictures in the bathroom mirror.
Can I just say, there's not going to be any other better time to bring it up to this, but as you all know, I'm from Oakland, and the Oakland Tribune, after the Lord of the Rings movies aired and were successful, they ran a feature. I don't know who greenlit this, but it was Raiders fan or orc. And they did a side-by-side of an Oakland Raiders fan in their cardboard armor and like Neurosis shirts and whatever else, and then an Urukai like in the similar. And whoever did this, like, thank you. This is journalism, and I'm a fool for not saving that newspaper, because I have not laughed hard. I kept it. I put it in Ben's studio and put it on the wall, and everybody that came in was like, "This is amazing!" And I was like, "I know, paper of record. It was in the Tribune," and it was Raiders fan or orc, and it was exactly like it's like something anyone can do on like Facebook or something now, right? Because we all have like Photoshop and all these tools, but at the time I was just like, oh. Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean,
Raiders fan or orc?
The difference between the two is that when it's orc, somebody has like someone's directing them to go somewhere. When it's Raiders fans, I think they're just fucking in the middle
mayhem.
of
well, and the reason why, and for those that I'm not even a sports person, but like I used to practice in West Oakland. In East Oakland, and like when there was a Raiders game, there would be like armies of like fans in their cardboard armor and like crazy, like it looked like they were going to battle. And I was always sitting there with Chris, like where we ran for Ben's show, I'd be like, God, doesn't this kind of remind you of Lord of the Rings? And then sure enough, I wasn't the only one that thought that, apparently. And also that's Mike, that was the practice space, the Neurosis practice in the hall from us.
Oh yeah, was that like down by not Shark Bite, but right down the street? What is that place? I know the one you're talking about.
They were at Shark Bite later. This place was over like almost towards the Coliseum. It was in Fruitvale.
Oh right,
I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
But there's a great story about them being like, "Hey, we got this drum full of bees. Can we bring that in and record that?" And like the guy running the place is like, "No, you can't. We're not going to let you do that." But anyway, whatever. That's neither here nor there. Raiders fan or orc? Thank you. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, I got a question for you.
The other thing that I remember from the Two Towers DVD features or whatever, when they were doing one of those things, they had Andy Serkis jump into like this really cold water, because they were shooting like it was getting
the
to
scene
be, like,
in the river, right? Yeah.
And he was just jumping in, and he was like bitching the entire like featurette or whatever, and he's like, it's so cold, and they just keep making me go in here and try to pretend to grab a fish.
I'm really glad that Andy Serkis has had a successful acting career since then, because he had to bitch for so long about like, I'm acting, I'm a real actor, I should be considered, and so I'm really glad that, and he's great as a character actor. Like I think he's amazing.
He definitely loves it once he gets to the actual scene where he gets
him and Doug Jones.
Like he gets the Smeagol and Deagle scene in like Return of the King. He's hamming it up that entire time with he's still doing the voice, and it's like, damn, Gollum even talk like that then. Like
you think it was the ring, but no, he always talked like that. He's always kind of a jacked up little dude. Anyway, all right, so you get down there, you've got this working relationship going on where there's the practical effects going. Like is it scene by scene? Is it like block by block? Is it frame by frame? How's this going?
They pretty much did it just like how they shot. They shot it chronologically, right? And so I was there for the full year of what we call pre-production. While they were shooting, we were figuring out all the tech, right? And so basically during that time, we were working on all three films at the same time, just trying to make sure that we could block out things, solve the problems that needed to happen. and this happens in film. This happened on the Matrix films too, where you kind of work it all out, and you're working with a supervisor or whatever, right? In both cases, it was just one person between us and the directors, or the directors would be there. But usually the director's busy shooting, and then they're going to be busy editing. And then they show up and they go, no, it's all wrong. Or, and they make, but you've kind of been through the paces enough times, and you're familiar with the material, that then you kind of bring it to full fruition and what the director actually wants.
Did you ever have stress dreams where you ended up like dreaming Lord of the Rings while the editing process was going on?
Yeah. I'm a bit of a workaholic anyway, but it's more like it's like, okay, I'm going to go to bed at 3, and that means I can get up at 7. And then, can you function on 2-4 hours of night, like I sleep a night and kind of get through, and a lot of stress. Yeah. There were definitely times where it's like, oh, we got to deliver this thing and time for this. But I was relatively young too. There was definitely, I remember driving home from the studio we lived out in Breaker Bay. It's beautiful, like basically facing the South Island and across the Cook Strait, and just going like, oh, I'm 36 or whatever I was at the time. Like I could have a heart attack. Like I could totally have a heart attack. It was like, oh fuck. Like, so yeah, a lot of stress. And there was, there was definitely ebbs and flows.
Total vindication. Thank you.
There you go. I know. It should just be orc fans, right?
Right, exactly.
That's what it should be. Yeah, but there were definitely phases and dramas, and not scandals exactly, but where there were turnovers, and where the studio was like, we're giving you all this money. And I saw this on the Matrix too, where it's like, is it getting done? Is it going to happen? And everybody's just working as hard as they can.
They didn't push on the actual cut, right? Like they gave Peter Jackson, like New Line gave Peter Jackson just kind of freedom on that final cut.
From what I understand, yeah, that was just part of the deal, I think, up front. But I wasn't
so smart.
I worked with him a lot, but I never asked him shit like that.
I was like reading about like the actual
final cut or what? Yeah, that was
I was like,
awkward.
no, but I was reading, and then I watched like some of the featurettes again, and downloaded them because they're on YouTube, all of them. But I was reading about how the original producer was going to be Harvey Weinstein, and he was like, oh, I'm not going to give you the money for 3 movies because obviously like that's a very different, kind of like he's not going to take a chance on that or whatever, and maybe if Peter Jackson was a woman or something. No, I don't know. But Harvey Weinstein.
What is this, Horizon? Yeah, thank you.
So Harvey Weinstein was like, oh, well, you're going to have to do it as 2 films. Like all 3 books is 2 films. And then he said, well, I don't even want to give you that much. You're going to have to do it as 1 film. All 3, 1 film. And it can't be more than 2.5 hours or something. Like,
which is
like,
what Boxy won. When it was like, you can't do that. You can't tell that much story in that little amount of time.
Which is and then I guess they put it onto they put the rights or whatever up, but he had to be a dick about it and go, oh well, I'm gonna have like these really high level like like contract things in there so that nobody picks it up. And the New Line was like, no, but we love this idea, we want to do this. And then they're like, it has to be. We finally got to New Line, and he's like, it has to be 3 movies, and they have to be like 3 hours a piece. And Peter Jackson's like, oh shit, okay, like we're back.
But there's
to that.
like what's crazy to think about is that there was not a precedent for that.
It was super prescient, right?
Yeah,
like
nowadays, friggin', I'm pretty sure that new Beverly Hills Cop movie is 3 hours. Everything's 3 hours, like whatever. But that was not done.
I mean, it was Star Wars, basically, right?
Yeah,
like, that was it.
Gollum is weird.
Gollum is weird. Thank you for giving money to say that.
Weird. You should do your you could do the stop cam on that. Anyway, whatever. I'm giving advice about doing bits. Never mind. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, no, I thought that was genius.
I think you're weird.
There you go.
But there was no precedent for anything like on that scope and scale. There were like even like a movie being like 3 hours long. I was like, what do you think this is? Like Gone with the Wind? I mean, and even that could have tightened it up.
Lawrence of Arabia?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, luckily the producers, I mean,
Yeah, I
there was
watched
a
this on
couple-
DVD, and it was 2 DVDs.
Turned it over for the rest. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, we ran out of disc.
Put up the Nine Fingers song. There are a lot of songs that are not in.
I know. I've never had to do that. I wonder, like the 76 minutes on a CD, like when you're making a record, you're like, oh, I got to fit it in this thing. I don't even know what the maximum DVD, and do they compress it more, or what is that?
All I know is all my DVDs are 2 DVD sets, and I still got them.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a bunch of Blu-ray now too.
Like along with like Arrested Development season 1 and
it was the extended.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was like close to 4 hours. I think they can do like almost 2 hours on one DVD.
That's what's streaming now on Max is the extended, and there's a whole conversation to be had for that, and some of that is relevant to you,
versions.
Mike. But they I think they default to they did for me. They defaulted to the extended. Maybe they just think I like long movies.
Now, when I went to go back to rewatch them, they were trying to give me the regular
extended.
editions, and I'm like no, I want all of it.
Well, because the Two Towers is like 4 hours, right? I mean, it's like pretty long. That has like the most extra stuff. I mean, that's the most anyway. But it has the most extra stuff for show.
I mean, that's something I think it's really important to acknowledge too. What Peter Jackson and Fran did, to just what they chose to cut out and keep in, like they cut so much out of those books,
Can I just say that the Mouth of Sauron in Return of the King is so freaking awesome. You could build a franchise on just the character design of Mouth of Sauron. Right, but he cut it because and probably because Aragorn just like, I'm sick of your shit, and he beheads him. And it's like, that's kind of not really what a hero would do, because it's like an ambassador. It is cool and it's very cathartic. Don't get me wrong, but every time and I watched for these episodes, I rewatched everything, and I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going full extended edition. I'm gonna watch all these, and I was like, oh yeah, the Mouth of Sauron, and then I was just blown away by like. If you were to give that to like what, Blumhouse or something?
I'm the Mouth of Sauron. I'm Sauron. I never stop talking.
If you give that to like Blumhouse or something, they'd be like, cool, this is our marquee character. We're going to build 10 movies around for a franchise. Because it's just the character design is so awesome. And Jackson was like, doesn't fit with Aragorn. Yeah. Get it out of there.
Well, we were talking yesterday about that entire Death of Saruman sequence.
He's just up there talking trash for like 10 minutes. It's great.
And then you see him and Grima and like what happened, like Wormtongue, like what happens to them. And instead of doing that, they cut it out, and then it's like, oh, well, they'll see the Palantir on the ground and know that like he got defeated.
Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, don't worry.
We took care of it. Like watched it again. It was like, because I must have watched the extended version at one point or something. Because I was like, where's the scene where Saruman dies? Like that has to be in there. And it's like, nope, let's just we're moving on past. So
there's so much story to cover. They were like, Saruman died on the way back to his home planet.
Saruman
and I love that when they filmed his death, that Christopher Lee was just like, Peter Jackson asked him to yell out a certain way. Christopher's like, when you stab someone, they don't scream like that.
Yeah, I have that. I have that clip. I love that clip.
Oh, great.
Ultimate, and Christopher Lee, of course, who was the biggest Lord of the Rings fan in the world, read it every year, and like, if I remember correctly, even like met Tolkien. Right?
Yeah, he was the only one
hung out with him.
He actually knew him in real life.
Tolkien,
yeah.
Wow. I didn't realize that. That's pretty amazing.
And apparently,
him. I wish I had.
I mean, just for the hammer stuff alone, like legend, right? But like,
Nazi killing.
And actually being a dude that killed Nazis too. Oh, cool. This is all right.
You ought to see me with a 357 Magnum. I'm awesome.
When Wormtongue rises up and comes up behind Saruman to stab him, of course, it was my job as director to talk to Christopher Lee and to explain to him what I wanted. So I started to go into this long explanation about what sort of sound he should make when he got stabbed.
I seem to recall that I did say to Peter, have you any idea of what kind of noise happens when somebody's stabbed in the back? And I said, well, because I do.
Oh, yeah. It's not. I like that.
It's because the breath's driven out of your body.
He proceeded to sort of talk about some very clandestine part of World War II.
He used to be in the British Secret Service, whatever they were called, the OSS.
He seemed to have expert knowledge of exactly the sort of noise that they make, and so I just sort of didn't push the subject any further. I just said, well, you obviously know what to do, Christopher, so I'm sure you'll do it great, and he did.
Lot to unpack there. Can I just say I love that you can see the parking lot off from the chroma key. It's like, oh, there's the parking lot over there. It's like, oh my god, amazing.
Apparently, we don't actually know what Christopher Lee did during World War II, and they're promising that there's going to be a documentary that his family is part of or something that's coming out in the next couple of years that's going to like reveal the secrets of like what his wartime service was.
They finally declassified what he did.
Yeah.
Oh my god. That sounds incredible. Cool. As long as there's no biopic. No biopics, please. Thank you.
Like with the family, I think they're making this entire like 2-part documentary. Like it's going to be 2 movies.
Come on, don't you want Will Smith to play Christopher Lee?
No, I don't.
Okay, so full reset on that. So the operating, you've got scenes like that are coming in, right? There's lots of chroma key, there's lots of green screen stuff like that. How much of the finished product are you seeing? Are you seeing dailies that like have like the effects?
That was a bit later. But yeah, we were working with the footage because they were filming it chronologically. So the idea was they'd film, the footage would end up on our servers, and then we could start working, in earnest right away. So there was stuff that would maybe later become final, but you got to understand it, like everything's going into a frame, right? Like that's so, and to get the frame to film, you've got to do all this like color grading and what are the black levels and what type of film are we transferring from and what sort of film are we transferring to? Because this is before digital cameras too, right? So they had to digitize everything and then go back out. So there's all these parts of the pipeline that our group, the Weta Digital team, was in charge of, right? And so
those Avid storage boxes give me anxiety just looking at them.
Oh, it was crazy. Just the sheer quantity of everything, right? Like, and in those days, in that part, like until we were in actual post-production, I would get meetings with Peter and I'd have, the storyboards you're talking about, like just this, I have these like massive books that are just, the whole film pretty much in storyboard. And I'd be like, okay, I've gone for 45 minutes. And I'd go through the entire film, like, okay, scene, the act 5, scene 749 frames for this. And he's like, oh, right, that's when the writers of Rohan and, and I'd just be like, film 3, film 2, it didn't matter. He knew exactly what I was talking about, which was really remarkable. Like it was almost never that he had to actually look and go, oh, right, I see. Like he pretty much, and that's, it's a shit ton of shots, it's a lot of scenes and a lot of shots.
I found this this is like the behind the scenes footage of them setting up the computers just to do the editing part or talking about that process.
So that was in the back of my mind constructing it. September 99 I started, a week before the shoot. It was a big unknown, huge unknown. We didn't know whether we were going to have 3 million feet of film, New Zealand films I've done in the past. Tops has been like 500,000 feet of film. We're getting Avid storage. We're getting 1.5 terabytes of storage set up and 6 Avids hooked together. Okay. Just gearing up for the biggest thing any of us have ever seen.
The size of the project was quite amazing. The amount of footage that was turned over through the cutting room was nothing I'd ever seen before.
Normally we'd have a ratio of 12 or 15 to 1, but on this I think we end up at 150 to 1. So that's a lot of film.
Some stages we had like 7 and 8 units out shooting, all producing footage.
How many units have we got? I've lost count. There's one over here, there's one down there, there's one here, 2 cameras. There's another one somewhere. Many, many units make much as work for the editors.
5 million feet was shot, of which we printed 70%. So we'd probably have about 3.5, 4 million feet probably.
We actually took editing equipment out onto location and followed Peter around.
They moved to Methven, Edoras. Peter was going to have a little bit of time for us. We decided we would put everything in a chopper and fly the length of the South Island up over the mountains. We had a chopper ride one morning fantastic up the Southern Alps. We came in over the set they'd built for Edoras, and Peter was flying in a chopper alongside, and he did an approach to Edoras. I think he was planning a shot as he sort of choppered in up the valley towards Edoras, a sort of tracking shot into Edoras. And so we landed there, and we were editing in a couple of hours' time. We set it all up and dumped the computers there. We're there for 4 or 5 days. Then the cut's done. We're out to Wellington and still waiting for Peter.
On a normal movie, your dailies are usually about 25 minutes long.
Sitting through dailies was, sitting through dailies was great some days and excruciating on others.
Just like this show.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
I don't know if they talk about it on the extras. I haven't watched all of them because I wasn't around by the time they were shooting that stuff. But, almost the entire film was also done in I'm getting old, so I'm forgetting what it's called. But basically like a moving storyboard, right? Like, so Peter always had like a clamshell, back then it was like a flip open video thing, and he would always have it to compare to what they're shooting. So they had already made that much footage out of people's drawings and editing it all together and basically making the film in that way too, right? So it's just an insane amount of footage and work gone into that, like just to make it come together.
Yeah, I mean, it's cast of thousands in many ways, right?
yeah, for sure.
I could completely dominate this, but KT, I was gonna say, like, if you want to jump in, please, by all means, because I could. I do a show where obviously I just do this myself, so it's my natural.
Well, yeah, and you guys know each other, so there's a patois that I'm thoroughly enjoying. I wanted to ask a technical question because we're talking about how much time all of this is taking. This is a painstaking process. But I did read a lot about how what makes Massive so different is that it's not a neural network that needed to be trained. It was the kind of thing that could be like changed on the fly. And I don't fully understand how that works, like that generalized concept of like, why was it so much quicker to work with?
Well, I mean, that might be a bit of an exaggeration. Quick was not my experience, but then again, I was like the third person on that team, right? The two people who were there before me wrote the software, and so I was kind of the first person to come in and use it. So I went through all the most painful parts of it, really. But it's basically a fuzzy logic network, right? So I know this isn't going to make any sense, but a neural network is you take a bunch of data and you train the neural net, and then it just does whatever it does. Whereas a fuzzy logic system is like what's called an expert system. So we would put all like 10,000 nodes all connected together. And so it kind of looks like a neural network, but it's all designed by you, right? So, and in virtual space, they could see, they could hear, they could talk a little bit. We gave them a little bit of language. They could feel the ground. I mean, and I'm anthropomorphizing, obviously, but in the computer, they could do all this. And so we would put together, we had a whole connections of nodes doing fuzzy logic to help them walk on the ground and follow the surface. We had things so that they would blend between animations when they go up a hill. It's like video games have a lot of this stuff too. It's just video games are constrained by real time. They have to function on the spot, whereas we would turn it on and go home or sit there and get drunk and wait till it's more often that than going home. I don't know if anybody's told you, but effects houses, I think even still today, is a lot of it becomes people's homes. So they have bars in their offices, and
when you compile and export,
I remember going to college in the 90s, learning computer graphics a bit, and just like the render time that things would have to do, and just the sheer amount of boredom you have for the computer to work for 45 minutes.
Yeah, and to Massive also, we weren't like shoving the simulations up onto a network. We were doing it right on our machines, right? And those were SGI machines too. They were probably $60,000 machines, not the $250,000 machines. But on the Matrix, I did a similar thing because I did all the swarming squiddies, and they basically they had 1,000 CPU farm. You often use it for rendering, but I would use it for simulations, and I could put it up on there and it would simulate at a much higher rate.
There's a second one now, right? Golem. It's a lot like Massive, but it does kind of like the same thing, and they're in competition or something constantly. That's the one I think they use on The Walking Dead, apparently, like fantasy. Yeah.
I mean, the goal was to make it so you couldn't tell the difference between a Massive character and a real character, and it was all put together kind of like G.I. Joe, right? So when you do an orc, you'd kind of roll the dice and give it a different weapon, and depending on what weapon it had, it would play different animation, and pick different.
Well, by Return of the King, I mean, it really is like pretty impossible to tell the difference, at least with the orcs. Like the difference between a real, like a rendered, like, you know, CGI kind of character and a real character. Like, I mean, you can still see it with like I know they did Massive with a lot of the horses too, and like I had like that didn't cross my mind at all. You know, maybe the elephant definitely kind of does, because they're just so much bigger than everything else. But like, you know, with the horses, it never crossed my mind that was like you know, a lot of them were added in through CGI. Like I was like, oh, horses. Like,
well, you know, one of the reasons they hired me is I had done a ton of mocap at Protozoa, and so I directed a ton of motion capture in their studio, and it was a massive warehouse. Like they would, you know, put the dots on horses and ride them through. I mean, it was so big. They'd build like physical replicas of the digital landscape, or, you know, the digital version of the real landscape, and then they do so they could climb up stuff. And then Randy Cook, the animation director, who, to your earlier point, KT, he was friends with Harryhausen, right? Harryhausen came and visited, and he really purposely made sure that all the hand-done animation felt like Harryhausen. So if you look at the Cave Troll, you know, it's kind of almost on twos. It's kind of got this jittery feel. And what it does is it's a language that we all know from traditional animation. And so you're more forgiving of the weird digital artifacts, and because if it's familiar from this cheap animation world, and it puts it in this other space too that's very kind of it sings, it harmonizes really nicely with Peter Jackson's weirdo, you know, camera angles and kind of wide lenses, you know, that kind of thing.
Some of those camera angles are so fucking good though,
right? But they're kind of reminiscent of his earlier styles, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, you can watch like the you know, like the battle scene with Aragon or whatever, when he's going through the crowd and they kind of circle around him. And you can watch, you know, Brain Dead, where he has the baby, the fucking creepy zombie baby. It's like it's a very similar set of shots. Like,
No, and like the weird, like kind of like pseudo Dutch angles and stuff that he's doing, that like it's all Heavenly Creatures. When like I think I mentioned we did Heavenly Creatures, right? That when he has the animated statues running around, it's like, oh yeah, you can see where it's like this would be like the next progression for him, is to like to do that, because it's like it's one thing to be able to do the one, but to be able to do the other, and like also have it be like, oh yeah, that looks like what's the noir with Orson Welles where he's running around in the sewers.
Third Man.
Third Man, yeah. To do Third Man angles with that is like, yeah. It's the Third Man apparently, but yeah, but like that's melding modern art with melding to like classic filmmaking sensibilities.
Yeah, and that's it. And Randy Cook was like, I don't know if he and Peter had talked about it, but they clearly figured out this aesthetic that kind of blurred they knew that they had to get the CG to a certain level, and Gollum was like number one. Like, it
doesn't work without Gollum, right? There's no way you can do Lord of the Rings without a good Gollum.
Gollum's the only one that's like literally just all CG, right?
Yeah.
Like, although there's a lot of digital double, which I did a lot of animation direction on, because Randy ended up really trusting me to do that stuff. And so, and that was hard, because it was like basically the fellowship, right? And getting them in there and directing them through stuff where they can't see what it is. And like, you know, and they're like, who are you? I mean, literally Ian McKellen came in. There's a crew of like 4 guys who ran the tech of the motion capture stage. And I'll tell you about the head guy in a second. He's amazing. But like, so he came in and was like, meeting everyone. Oh, this is Patrick. Oh, lovely. Nice to meet you. This is so-and-so, so-and-so. And this is Mike. He'll be directing you today. And I'm like with a Thrasher sweatshirt. And there's no like, lovely to meet you. It's like,
I don't know nothing about no elves. I'm here to rip.
But yeah, and he definitely did the whole like, well, that's not what I would do as Gandalf, all that kind of stuff. And but it was, because I had to get technical stuff from him as well as, his performances. So
sure.
But by the end, we were fast chums,
Did he adjust to that well? Because one of the things I want to bring up and specifically talk about is the whole
quickly before that, just so I can put this off screen. This is what you were talking about with the heavenly creatures and the statue,
right?
Kind of thing. And you definitely do see like the reminiscence to future Lord of the Rings stuff on this. I mean, not just the sword, but also like the stance and everything.
Orson Welles, the most hideous man alive. Yes. The Balrog scene. I feel like that has been homage. It's been straight up ripped off. It's been made into
podcast intros for movie podcasts.
It's been made into multiple memes. Like it has taken off a life its own. And watching it for the first time in a while, I've seen all these movies a lot, but just watching it again, like with a more critical eye, because we're covering it, we're trying to get into the underneath the hood to a certain degree. There's so much to it. The shadows, like when it first appears, like how the lighting comes in and it changes. Delicate may not be the correct word, but it helps bring a sense of dread that, like, you get to the point, like, when you see, like, oh, this is something that scares Gandalf, we're fucked. Like, basically, like this is the guy that, like, you can't, this is scared of nothing. And he's like, let's get out of here,
It's just like KT.
Apparently.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, there's something almost religious about it too, because it's the entire sequence, right? He's going through what's basically hell. Like, I mean, it's Moria, but like they even like make sure that like the Balrog is a demon. Like, it's supposed to be something that's reminiscent of our kind of weird religious, mythology. And for Gandalf to like reappear later as, Gandalf the White, literally resurrected, like there's something deeply almost religious about his travel through hell, and he defeats the Balrog in hell.
Well, that was, I mean,
Gandalf says, "Run, you better run."
Fly, you fools.
That scene where he runs onto the bridge and stops and then turns, like that was on my list of mocap in that day. And I remember being like, okay, what are we doing now? Like, and he's like, what's my motivation here? It's like, okay, well, there's a giant flaming monster chasing you. And I don't know, maybe a shot made it in the film. I haven't analyzed it in a while, like, because it was mostly actual live action. But I think maybe some of the shots that are way up high where he's kind of running and then made it in. But the Balrog itself,
in front of a blue screen, is that it has to be, right?
Well, the mocap is just dots, so it doesn't matter what's in the background. But obviously, the stuff with him standing there, it's all CG in the background, and he's probably blue screened or whatever. But the Balrog was one of those cases where this amazing visual effects artist was actually designing him as if you'd pour gasoline on him. So it was like a thermodynamic simulation. So and it was all this thing of like, how do I get the gas on him evenly, and then how do we light it, and do we have to wait for the flame to spread all over him and then he's on fire? And it was really such an amazing piece of tech. But then it came time to actually deliver it, and it was just too slow, and it wasn't directable. You know what I mean? Like, everybody kind of goes, I want it to be real, and then they're like, but I need to be able to shoot from this angle and not have flame there, but have flame here. And what ended up happening is another amazing artist who ended up working at Valve for a while was just like, he just took 6 like gamer PCs and just built it out of cards, right? So they went and shot a bunch of pyro stuff and then put it on cards and then floated the cards around the animated thing. And so those effects are actually like gamer style, old school particle effects, which it's a kind of a classic example of like, yeah, we're going all in on high tech, and it's like, fuck it, we need to, throw some duct tape on and poke some holes in some things and shine a light through it, and it's working.
How did were you on part of the team that did in Return of the King the whole sequence where he goes into the cave and it's like the dead people that have been like stuck in the cave because they betrayed Gondor? So they've
I wasn't. I know the people who worked on that. I wasn't really on the Return of the King fully. Like, I was gone by then. I had done pre-production on all of them, but I wasn't on that team. No.
I was just wondering because it's the second kind of one of these cave, and they even reference it with Gimli being like, "Oh, a dwarf being afraid of going into an underground tunnel." That whole it's kind of homaging the first kind of thing where he's gung ho about going into Moria, and he's like, "Yeah, well, last time I found all my family dead." So,
right, that was a friend of mine, Shane Cooper, I think, worked on that. He also did, the effect when you put the ring on.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Which, and everything kind of it's a 2D sort of post-process thing. And he inherited that code that everyone loved, but it only had the effect because there was a bug in the code that made the effect. So his job was to figure out what the bug was doing so they could control it. And he was just like, I don't know how to do this. But it came out great, obviously.
Because it's so weird looking. Yeah. That's amazing. Well, and it's like, it's something. Wow, funny that's like a digital, like screw up.
And he had to leave it in or kind of like refabricate it or whatever.
But there's nothing that looks like that. I've seen movies attempt to recreate that apparently on their Grandmama's Trio or something. I'm not sure, but like it looks horrible. It's like, what? I know you're trying to do a Lord of the Rings style thing, but you should really stop doing that because it doesn't look anything like that. It just looks like trash from the trash can.
I mean, it's definitely harder to make somebody like go invisible than you'd think it would be, right? Because it's like you can kind of just cut them out of the thing, and it's like, no, like to make somebody realistically look like they went invisible, it's more about the fading away, and it's like
it's easier to do the Predator thing, right? Which we talked about that in
right,
actual Predator
thing.
Like you still kind of see where they are. Like the final scene where it's Gollum on top of Frodo and he bites off the finger, but he's invisible the entire time, and you have to be able to see, like, you have to see Gollum's actual hand and where he's grabbing on Frodo, and you have to imagine that part of it with your mind. Like, that's an incredibly probably like complex thing to actually pull off.
And it's a culmination of the goddamn movie too.
Yeah.
It's like so important to the storyline. So it's like if you blow it there, then that's all anyone's gonna remember. Oh, that really sucked when it all looked like a video game at the end.
Right. Yeah.
That's a fake finger.
It's funny. I always like to give big props to the compositing and roto teams. Like by the end of the first film, it was like, hundreds of people in a farm all compositing images together and people drawing lines around him to, extract his arm from the image. And, those people, it's probably the most used CG computer manipulation. In the old days, they would, the whole famous, they painted on the glass and put the screen behind and do all that. But it's just such a heavily used, like he's on blue screen, now he's on top of a mountain, or,
and I wonder if like Ian McKellen and Christopher Lee, coming from that world, if they were actually more comfortable with like the mocap stuff and like the chroma key than like more the modern actors where they didn't have to like deal with that, right?
Yeah, there was definitely like I said, that aesthetic of the hands-on stuff is pret's prevalent in those films, I think, and that's part of why I love them.
Well,
from the chat,
it's acting to like a hyperdrive level. Like it's acting in a way that you have to like realistically, make it seem like you're in that space while also, you're nowhere near it. Like it's a theatrical style of acting. I think that you have to be comfortable.
Yeah, it's more theatrical, yeah.
Which, like, if I remember when Ian McKellen did Shakespeare at Mark Maron, and he was like, okay, I get Shakespeare now, like literally one-on-one. I was like, all right, I get it. From the chat, how involved were the miniatures? Also, did you guys get a feeling that you were doing something great, or were you just nose down and working? From Dizzle, who's
the miniatures were amazing. Everything was amazing in that regard. Like we went to the actual Minotaurus. Like there was a physical one. It was probably, I don't know. I'm trying to I don't know how to describe how big it was, but it was the main gates, right? And it just like all the detail was etched into the front of the gates, and they opened and you could go in, and it was the street, and then it had a cobblestone street that went up and little shops and the whole thing. And we like had a party there or something at one point. I wish I had gotten all those photos together. I'd love to show everybody, but my parents were there. That was cool. But the miniatures were the same. Like, so Minas Tirith was probably, it was the whole thing, right? So it had the whole, up the mountain thing. And it was, I don't know how to describe it. It's probably, I want to say 25 feet around and probably 15 feet high, maybe 20 feet by 15. And it was big. It was really large, and you could go and look and see all the different stuff. And then they had an exact digital version of it too, right? So you could easily composite those things together. As for, the truth is I just always move on.
It's coming to Max actually next
we're not
week.
done yet.
Yeah, we're not. It's not over.
Yeah, but like you like in the middle of Fellowship of the Ring, though, you can watch it and be like, I'd like the extended version of this has to be so much crazier. Like this is the same thing with the interview, right? Like,
No, we're gonna get gifts. It's gonna be crazy.
I actually had to take a minute before this and just go, okay, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to talk about that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
There are things that are not right to be shared, I don't think. But
wait for the statute of limitations to be over. Yeah.
I'm still like, I'm amazed that it's still like, I just forget that it's even big, honestly. It's like, I got some Oscars. That was cool, and by then I was working on the Matrix films or whatever. And
Average Tuesday for McMorasky. Sure. Yeah.
But there was a point. I mean, there was definitely that first year up until there was the famous Con viewing, right? They did 15 minutes. They showed it at Con. And, it's the thing of the producers are like, to Barry Osborne's credit, he was very supportive from what I understood, but there was a guy on the ground too, and they would fly. That was Peter Jackson's genius move. It was in New Zealand, so they'd have to fly all the way down there and then hop a plane. They'd fly to oh my God, I can't remember. Anyway, they'd have to take 2 planes to get down there, and then they'd show them stuff and they'd leave, and so they'd say, you need to blah blah blah, and they'd be like, oh yeah, see you later, and they go back to the States, right? So there was definitely periods though where people were like, oh my God. And even us, we were like, we don't know. And we went in, I remember doing the screening of the 15 minutes that was going to be shown at Con. And we all came out of the theater and were just like silent. Like everyone was like, oh fuck. Like we gotta work a lot harder, admittedly that was like 2 weeks before we had to be done. So we all worked really hard. And I think, history worked out in that regard, but we were all terrified that was what was going to Con. And then,
what 15
Con,
minutes was it?
It was you could probably look it up. There was a short version that he showed like as a preview or whatever. I don't think it might've been a contiguous 15 minutes. I don't remember, honestly. It was 25 years ago, 20. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't last week.
Yeah. But yeah, so there was definitely this thing of like, I don't know. But by the end of the first film, for sure, there were problems. Like, and I still cringe at some scenes that I worked on, but I think we were all like, yeah, this is pretty killer,
there's so many moving pieces to it. There's so many parts to it. The fact that like it was done all at once too, just to show, so the actors didn't age necessarily, and so everybody was like in it. Hopefully Sean Bean doesn't fall off the mountain when he's climbing up to to do his parts.
Yeah, Vigo gets stepped on by his horse when he's
right.
Yeah,
I just think that's so amazing. But like where they're knowing that the footage that you got in, the way that you're working at it, it's a very utilitarian way to kind of view a movie as it's coming together. And this is kind of like an extension of Dizzle's comment of like, did you know you were working on something special, right? Like, was there a moment that you're like, oh yeah, this is this is cool. Like this is like, I've not seen this before, or knowing that you had read the books, you knew the source material, that you're like, oh, he's nailing this. Like, was there like a clutch point for that?
It was probably when we got the final con thing sort of working, and it had a bunch of, them like, in the lane where the Nazgul are on the horse, and the kind of the force focus thing, and that kind of stuff. But it was kind of like this on the Matrix films too, is you get the script, you've got the storyboards, you're seeing a lot of footage that you're working on, you're seeing all the dailies. We had this thing called Shot Sub where it was just like a scroll, and when you would get some work done, you'd post it up there so you could see everybody's work, like, and just click, and a little quick time would come up and you watch it. So you're getting bits and pieces, but there's a lot, the vast majority of the film doesn't involve CG at all, right? So you're not seeing that. You're not necessarily seeing that being cut together, unless you're like on the Matrix films. I was a supervisor. I mean, I was a lead on Lord of the Rings, but I wasn't in that position to sort of review like bigger picture stuff, like how is this team working across this series of shots. I usually would be on a scene, right? And so I'd get to see the scene maybe, but not necessarily across. Or I would work, like I did all the Isengard stuff, where they fly through and the orcs are all like, and they're digging the Urukai out of the ground and whatnot.
I call that the orc meth lab in my Letterboxd review, by the way.
Yeah. But so it's kind of like, it's sort of like, when you're shooting, you go to a location, you do all the shots non-chronologically, usually. That's sort of how we tended to split stuff up, right? So that you're like, well, I've got the models, I know I'm familiar with all the scenes. And so you kind of end up working that way often. So yeah, it's hard. It was, but it was, before we were done, we definitely knew we had a film, and then we got to see it before it was premiered, for sure.
Yeah. How was that like cast and crew screen?
Did you have a favorite scene that you worked on?
What's that?
Did you have a favorite scene that you worked on?
Oh boy. It's funny, but it's kind of the lightweight stuff. Well, I really love the Isengard stuff for sure, but there's a bunch of digital doubles in Lothlorien, and it all looks so pretty. There's something about it. It's like my work I don't think was particularly good, but it's like the way it all came together. And then there's a few scenes at Helm's Deep that I worked on it's the Urkai. Like the whole thing looked really cool, and the way we solved the problems of it were interesting. I mean, there's just so many though. It's kind of like, and you do, go ahead. And I did pre-production too. So, like, really, my favorite work is like the elves fighting the orcs, and I might not have put that shot together, but I designed the motion trees, captured all of the, like, working with the sword master and a stunt person, like captured all the animation, went and chopped it all up so that it's like, this part of the swing, and then it's going to split off into like a miss or a hit or a, that stuff. Right. And putting those puppets together was probably the stuff that I enjoyed the most, other than obviously, directing Viggo Mortensen was pretty fun. Like that was cool. Like, and I really genuinely like him. And I didn't realize till after that he had been married to Exene Cervenka. Right. So I was just
he was really
like, oh yeah, he was like a spoken word poet. Right. So
what? Well, I know he kind of came to acting a little later, as far as like finding notoriety, but
and they have a kid together. And we it was kind of one of those people that I met, and I was just like,
was that his son?
What's that?
Was that his son? That he got on set?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because apparently when Viggo Mortensen got the call for Lord of the Rings, he's just like, oh, I'm gonna have to think about it. He hangs up the phone, and his son's like, Dad, was that Lord of the Rings? He's like, yeah. He's like, you're doing it. Call them back.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
You're screwing up if you don't do this. Yeah. Well, which is wild to think about, and also wild to think about Exene, peace and love. She's got some pretty wild political views these days. But anyway.
Yeah, well, there's that too. But
the music's great, and she's a legend.
There was a morning. I have so many stories, but I remember getting to work one morning, and like I'd probably been up till 4, and rolling it at 8, like with my coffee, and there's like, either an email or whatever. Randy, the director, is like, "Come up to my office," the animation director. And I went up there. I was like, "Okay, what's up?" And he's like, "Viggo Mortensen is at the mocap stage, and he doesn't want to do motion capture." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "You're gonna go convince him to do motion capture." And I was like,
"Wow,
you mean like right now? Like, can I?" He's like, "Yeah, drink your coffee on the way over." And so I walked over, and I went in, and there he is, like just in the, in the couch in the back, the lounge room or whatever. And we just had the best conversation. It was such a good conversation that, like I said, if I wish I'd known that he had been married to Exene, because I would have been like,
"Oh my God,"
dude,
like instant
we're
bond.
So,
yeah.
But I could feel that anyway somehow. And his concern was he was just way too ahead of his time. He's like, "If I do this, you're going to have my motion without me."
Oh my God.
Right? And I was like, yeah, that's true.
In my head, I was thinking that's what he was gonna say, and I was like,
yeah, and he was like, "Well, how it's not in my contract, so how can I know that you're not going to go do a Taco Bell commercial with it?" And I was like,
"Dang,
I don't know, dude. That's way above my pay grade." But the thing I will tell you is I don't think the tech is there yet. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to capture stuff we need, right? So if they're going to put you swinging a sword at people in a Taco Bell commercial, I can't stop that, right? But they're not going to, it's like, but now you could take that data, feed it into AI.
After I eat Taco Bell.
Totally. Right. So, now that actually is a problem that you have to worry about.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in all their contracts. And so I did talk him into it. I basically said, "Well, here's the deal. Like, you don't have to do it, but your digital double, your real life double will do it. And that's who will be in the film." And he was like, "Okay. All right."
Now, do you got a chance to work with Alan Lee at all? Because I know he is a legendary artist, and the fact that they had him come in and do, character designs and set designs, and such an amazing draftsman. And I know a lot of the models and stuff came out of that. I didn't know if you had any interactions with him.
I got to go into his office once, and he was there, so I did meet him, and I saw a lot of art on the walls. But more interestingly to me is the artist who was sitting right next to him was Jeremy Bennett. And Jeremy came to work at Valve right around the same time I did. And nice. We surfed together. We're really close friends. And he is just like a stellar artist, and, worked next to Alan Lee that entire time. But yeah, no, I got to go do a lot of that stuff. I got to be on set pretty often because I'd be watching and I wasn't really a set supervisor, which is the effects job, is to go and make sure they don't do something you can't deal with in the effects side of things. But every now and again, there would be something that would be either really directly apropos to the mocap I was doing or to a massive scene, or, what I mean? Or I had to explain, like communicate to Peter something that we knew that he needed to know. But, I definitely went to the Bigatures shop a lot just because I really dug that. And, just all the craft stuff. But, that wasn't, my job was in our building, right? They were right next door, but,
right.
Yeah.
Did you ever get stoned and go to the Bigatures?
No, but it's hard to say, actually. Yeah. Like I said,
it's hard to say, he says.
The culture
on camera
places are, like I said, when you're only sleeping 4 hours.
This man has a kid, man. Come on.
And, yeah.
It just seems like it'd be kind of fun thing to do one day. It's just,
Yeah.
Hang out in the Bigatures room.
Right.
It does make sense that Viggo would want to have his own body in the mocap suit, though, because he took so much time learning all the sword play and dedicating himself to that. So that was a good way to We'll get it without you. It might not be as good.
I know. I often present it like a trick, like the like turning your finger on the knob in the studio, but not actually turning the knob. But it really wasn't. I was like, just dude, like you're gonna be way better than this B grade double of yours, And
right.
And he was totally into it. I mean, although I am breaking a promise because he was like, but no one can know that it's actually my data. That was his thing. He doesn't want anybody to use his data.
Well, I have bad news for him about all everybody's data now. Like this.
Yeah, it's at least your concerns. I also love, and this is, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this, but like this was like he'd been acting for like 16 years or something when he got in this movie. Like it was, and like he's one of those guys that like he's looked basically the same since he was like 21, right? So so it's hard to tell, but it's like oh no, he was not like an overnight success like say Orlando Bloom,
No, right.
It was his first movie, by the way.
Right. I learned that from KT show, actually.
Right, and Dominique, right? Wasn't Dominique and Billy Boyd? I think all three of them were kind of stage actors, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
But yeah, Viggo was like, doing the work, being the character actor, being like the henchman, being like the random guy number 5. Yeah.
He was like an Amish guy in The Witness.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, he's such a good actor.
He's so like History of Violence. First of all, I loved him in this. When I saw History of Violence, I was like, oh, this man's like a force. Like holy crap. I also was like, Eastern Promises is great too. Both of which directed by Cronenberg.
Yeah.
Wildly underserved on this show.
Scripts, right? He has good choice in projects, I think, too. I mean, Sean Astin, too, right? Like, talk
Sean
about
Astin, amazing.
A lot of background. Yeah.
So we have people in the chat talking about Helm's Deep. We mentioned earlier when I was going through again on this rewatch because this is one of the reasons why I'm really glad you decided to do this with us, Mike. Because when we talked about, we cover a lot of stuff on this show, but the idea of like doing Lord of the Rings, like how do you cover Lord of the Rings? How do you do like there's so much. And you want to like do a service to all of it.
Yeah, please do our job for us and tell us how to cover the rings.
Well, I mean, all I'm giving you is one narrow perspective.
Well, I mean, before the comical interjection by the host, was that like what we came up with is like, well, let's approach it from multiple angles. Let's approach it from a technical perspective. Let's approach it from like acting perspective, narrative perspective, et cetera, because I think that we are in a time where these are widely regarded as like some of the best epic blockbusters of all time. Like when you think of like epic adventure fantasy movies, like it's like there's Lord of the Rings, huge gap, like everything else. But as individual movies, they also work. They work really well. And I was thinking about it, rewatching all of these many hours of movies, which I have done not as preparation for being on a show, but many times just for free over the years because I love them. And when I was thinking of like battles, like what are the best battles, epic battles in like movie history? Helm's Deep, man. Like it's hard to get much better than Helm's Deep as far as I'm concerned. And I would almost say that like
not a big fan of the shield ride.
The shield thing is silly, but whatever.
But it's a little bit,
but it's excusable because it's like one minor thing, and I will own up to the fact that I at one point called the Two Towers a delivery system for the Helm's Deep battle.
Yeah,
but it is so cool, and it is such a triumph of every aspect of this massive team working together and doing all of these things, even including narratively, like when you have Aragorn and Gimli, like, oh, we're gonna take the side entrance over here to go like surprise these guys from the side. It's like, wait, what? Like it's like silly, like Laurel and Hardy era things. Hey, we're over here now. Work because the massive scale of it.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have like the cast of thousands that would be like Ben-Hur or something, but they're orcs, right? And they're getting they're getting smooshed by boulders. They're getting set on fire. There's like the Olympic runner running through to set the stuff off. Like there's so many things that are happening.
Yeah.
How much of that was composed on a writing narrative level. Because again, coming from the perspective of we invoked History of Violence, the writer Joss Olson said like the best way you can write an action scene is the coolest fight you ever seen happens. And you let the fight coordinators work it out. And that's what you put in the script. Right? But like, it's so breathtaking and it's so crazy and it still works in the year 2024. Multiple decades later, it looks so much better than like most of the things that people are doing. So from the perspective of like your work on it and like, you know, the macro cosmic perspective versus like the larger overarching universe, how do you even do it?
It's huge. It's huge. Well, you've got Peter Jackson for one thing. Like, you know, if I was sleeping 4 hours, he was sleeping probably 2, right? And just like in that clip, like, you know, they were shooting out in the mountains, brought all the gear so they could edit. They all got done shooting and he just stayed and kept editing, you know, probably because he's like, no one's bothering me out here or something, you know, like, and a huge team like Christian Rivers. And there's a lot of people who had worked with him from the Feebles on who were right there. Christian did all of the, I'm just not remembering the term for it, but basically, you know, you can do your script and then you've got storyboards and then there's a version of it where you shoot, you know, the storyboards and then edit them together. So there's no actual motion, but you see when the cuts are and you put maybe some dialogue over it and that kind of thing. And then they'll do a lightweight CG version. So like, you know, the part when they're in Moria and they're going down the stairs and it breaks and it falls over, right? Like that's all done in advance in a really low res way in the computer. So when they shoot all the motion, you know what I mean? It's like, so you could edit it all together and go, oh, this sequence has a cadence and a rhythm to it. And then of course the director is the director. So they change it but they've been Peter was always part of that part of it. Previs, thank you. That's one word. That's the one word I was missing, but part of previs from the beginning. So he's probably not going to change it too much, but then they shoot all that footage. Right. And then we put all the stuff in, they edit it and right. And so it's like Peter Jackson's a big fan of a film being like running a war campaign, right? It is a hierarchical thing. Although he was really easy to work with in that way. In fact, one of my favorite shots in Helm's Deep that I did work on was the scene where they march up and they're standing there, right? And it was used in the trailer. And I remember he was like, okay, I want to see just an ocean of Uruk-hai and the walls of Helm's Deep. And I was like, okay, so I had the camera up here and it's looking down on him, right? And you know, and he came in the next day and he's like, okay, that's great, but I want to be down in them. You know, I was like, okay. So I dropped it down in the camera and it's like, he's like, yeah, but I want to see a big ocean of them. And it took a while because you've got all these different people doing different stuff. And I finally realized I was like, oh, I just need a hill. Like I need a hill that goes down. Because there wasn't one. It was just this kind of plane. And so I went to a friend who was in charge of the camera stuff. And he's like, well, I can do the cameras, but we need and so I went to the head of the modeling department. You know, you have to go through all these people who are like, you know, we've all agreed on what this landscape is and to get the hill in. And then finally I got the hill and was like, oh, right. You could be in them and still see this ocean of them beneath you. Right. And so it's like that, but like writ large. Everyone's trying to work with all the right people so that you're not screwing it up somehow or making it. Continuity. Peter Jackson doesn't really care too much about that, like specific continuity. There are scenes I've worked on where I was like, he's like, no, in this scene I want it ordered like this. You know, I'd be like, yeah, but in the previous shot they're completely different. He's like, oh, it doesn't matter. No one cares.
That was pre IMDb where people write continuity goof.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not a goof. It's just he's just like it looks better this way. You know.
Yeah.
Well, he's not wrong. Yeah.
in both the Helm's Deep sequence and then like really in the entire Battle for Gondor, there's like this aerial thing where they go above everything and you can see it is the Uruk-hai army first, and then there's that insane shot in Return of the King where Dimitri or whatever, like the Boromir's dad, is standing on top of the wall, and he looks down, and it's just surrounded by an entire sea of like just orcs, and they're just Sauron's army, like whatever, like because I'm sure there's like orcs that got like, but all together at the same time, and it's like it feels like an ocean at that point, like and I feel like it's got to be the Helm's Deep sequence that like gave you guys like the like the feeling that like, okay, we can do something that sweeping or that scale. Like
I said, I didn't really work on that, but I know that the idea was that it builds, you know what I mean, over time.
Yeah.
There's smaller skirmishes and larger, and the plan was always to have it be that. And the Oliphants are also massive, and and I've worked on, like I said, a couple films what do you call it, trilogies that work like this. The directors always are like, I just want it to play out, and then I'm going to film it, right? And I learned pretty quickly they don't actually mean that. They are like, I want it to all play out, I'm going to film it, and then you're going to craft it to be exactly what I want it to be, right? And so you kind of need the tools to do both, set it up like that. And so I'm sure by the time they were laying that, I mean, I have the storyboards of those exact scenes, right? And they look just like that, right? So the idea was in 3 years or whatever, however long it actually took, like that's where we'll be, like when we get there, right? And be able to render it, and the machines will be fast enough, and the tech will be there, and we'll have enough memory in them, and all that stuff, and enough people to deal with it, and those sorts of things. In fact, John Shields, he was the original production head for Weta Digital when I got there. I remember because I was there, I don't know, I feel like there was like 40 people, but it was probably more like 60 or something. And like we had an all staff, and we could fit in this little room with these stairs, and we were all like huddled around. And he had this whiteboard, and he was like, so here's where we are now. And he drew this like line that just kind of went almost straight up. And he's like, this is like doable. And he's like, and here's where we're going to be in 4 months, which is impossible. And then it's going to go like that for one film, and then another film, and another film. And we were all just like, is this supposed to be morale building or
right?
The thing with these like ever increasing gigantic sequences, Tolkien was like himself was in World War I, right? Like he was at the Battle of the Somme. And when you see like a map of like the Western Front like this, like you can see Middle Earth in this like map essentially. Like you can see the same like the same kind of landscape in it. And yeah. So he was at the Battle of the Somme where 3 million soldiers were all engaged from England, France, and Germany. We're all engaged in like slaughtering each other, and that's kind of like the amount of scale that by the time he got to like the Battle of Gondor, where everybody's kind of just destroying each other. It's like it's a direct kind of thing, which it's a metaphor, or like a metaphorical kind of thing. Like it's these men kind of fighting for like just as like industry comes to Middle Earth, like it's these kind of men fighting for their supremacy over like the wizard and orc other kind of
And
the stakes increase, and you have more and more parties involved,
Yeah.
and like more and more like people come in,
Yeah.
like to the point that like and it's sort of outside the scope of our conversation, Mike, but like in Return of the King, when like the other like army of men comes in and comes down and just smokes like all those orcs. It's like absolutely bodies them, and it's like at the time, because you're like, well, they're boned, all right, I guess everything's over, and then it's just and it's such a like classic like Seven Samurai style payoff where it's like it works so well.
Yeah. Well, and I do think it's no like coincidence that Peter Jackson has always been into World War II, right? And then this film and then he made films about World War II. And there is a thing that I noticed, and I was talking about like Randy Cook and Ray Harryhausen and sort of Peter Jackson's aesthetic. Like in those films, you can sense a certain amount of chaos. Like the production was probably a little chaotic, and his thing about war, like, and when these films got done, I was like, I could feel the studio in them, if like the studio felt kind of chaos, like showing up and being like, Viggo Mortensen's at the stage, go over and talk him into, like that. They're like, we were all very organized and really good at our jobs, and trying to do our best to hold it all together. But there's also sort of like, okay, we made it onto the beaches. Now we got to get to, past the bunkers. And then once we're past the bunkers, we got to get to the thing. And there is like a feel to the films that is like that, I think, Well,
Peter Jackson made that They Shall Not Grow Old World War One documentary. That's like he colorized the footage and
not just colorized, but like upgraded it with AI, which looks amazing on that. And when like like Spielberg and Cameron have tried to use it, it looks like crap on their movies. But like less said about that. But I'm glad he did it for that stuff to restore that footage, because really see the people.
It really sells it, right? And Get Back is all that too, right? Like it's yeah.
Well, and it's so interesting that even the source material, like Tolkien was like, he's very famous for saying it's not a World War II analogy, but like he was definitely influenced by World War One and the idea of there being this all-encompassing like evil that
just because it's not an allegory doesn't mean that it's just because it's not an allegory doesn't mean that you're not going to be pulling things from because history rhymes, like all the time. So. But there's obviously cool stuff.
And Wonder Woman took care of all of it, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's the sheer industrialization part of it that really resonated with me watching Two Towers this time, where it's like the ecological damage that the Uruk-hai and Saruman is doing, and that feels like a very early 20th century now is the time of men, and they're like, well, now is actually the time of the Iroquois and Saruman, and we're gonna industrialize the fucking thing. That has has a resonation with Germany at that point, I think.
Well, I also sorry, go ahead. Just because I'm a nerd like this, Birmingham was where Tolkien grew up, and that also gave us Ozzy Osbourne and his band. Black Sabbath.
England had
little band called Black Sabbath, pretty obscure. Yeah.
But the thing is, that industrialization is really important to their sound, is what I'm trying to get at. And you kind of have, you kind of see it at both ends. Like, Black Sabbath is the music of the orcs.
England had been ravaged by that, but I'm saying in the sense of it being kind of like a war cry. You know what I mean? Like, there's something very German about like the iron and blood kind of thing that. Goes into that.
Well, and the hobbits just wanting their like nice homey life and not to get involved until they're involved. Which interesting. You could make a whole theoretical podcast about like the not including the scouring of the Shire, right? From the books,
right?
And like I think it was the correct move not to do that personally.
Yeah,
but because it would be like, hey, everybody, have a good time. F you.
Yeah, remember Rosie over there? She's not so rosy anymore.
Yeah, exactly. They got. All right. At a certain point, it's just a bummer. Like it's just like which I mean, but also I think it's so interesting because like when you think of Lord of the Rings, you think of like this is one of the all-time. First of all, one of the best like multiple volumes of a series stories that exists, like the gold standard that even like someone like a George R.R. Martin like aspires to put at this level of quality and this like narrative purity to tell these like, grandiose stories.
And then he had the balls to like criticize Tolkien's work as if he hasn't even finished his fucking last book. Go.
I know he parties well though. I gotta say,
yeah, man is too busy having a good time.
I
can't fault him for that. Yeah, but to have them because the thing for me. Speaking as someone that was a Peter Jackson fan and a Lord of the Rings fan before these movies came out, I mean, like
before it was mainstream,
before it was cool,
that like I had a lot of stake in both of those things. I wanted Peter Jackson to be a success on a larger level, and moreover, I wanted them not to suck. You have to realize that the history of like adaptation for Lord of the Rings, not great. Not great. You had the Bakshi one. There's where there's a whip, there's a way is a solid jam. KT wants that trap remix. I understand. I agree. But like they tried to crimp too much movie into like one thing, and it just doesn't work. Although I will say John Hurt as Strider is pretty great.
I think one thing that works about the Peter Jackson approach is that he didn't set out to make Lord of the Rings. He set out to make a fantasy. He and his partner, like longtime partner Fran Walsh, they set out to make their own high fantasy kind of thing, and they like kept on realizing like, oh, we're just making Tolkien like this. So why don't we just actually try to?
Why don't we go to this? And it was a confluence of. Just I talk on my show about like there being this like weird gold rush mentality, like when Nirvana hit of like, oh yeah, we'll let any weirdo in. Well, let Steel Pole Bathtub in. Here's a major label contract. I'm sure they'll give us a hit. But
he's also beefing with.
But it is really remarkable.
It is. It 100% is remarkable.
He was also beefing with the New Zealand Film Commission before this.
That one guy was like his. It was his. He was the EPA guy in Ghostbusters to Peter Jackson's work, basically.
I mean, not just like if you're like seeing bad taste, you're like, we're paying for this.
Right.
I mean, I loved it, but
me saying hard same.
Taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the guy in that thing is like, we're cutting social welfare. Why don't we cut cultural welfare too? Like,
and he has such a just a almost put upon posh accent too. I remember goofing on him when we did that movie, but I was like, wow, this guy's really he's got an axe to grind about this. This is crazy. But that's the kind of world that Jackson's coming from. And then he's basically it's not a blank check, but it's the closest thing you're gonna get to it, right? It's like, yeah, go ahead. Sure, could work out great. Turns out, works out better than anyone could possibly have imagined. And inspired all of the worst stuff, and Hollywood learned all the wrong lessons. But 3 of the greatest large-scale epic movies of all time.
Yeah, I do wonder if the kids who enjoy it, who come to it, people who haven't seen it or whatever, if they understand, it was so at the edge of doable. It was just so barely doable, right? That, like I said, just the fact that my friend made Gollum work at all and be performable.
Astounding.
Really. And I just
joining
wonder.
Us now is Gollum.
What's that?
Joining us now is Gollum.
Oh, yeah.
Coming on screen now. No. Well, and so, Mike, you're actually giving me the best soft intro that you could ever possibly give it to, because there's a bit that we do on this show. That is called Letterboxd One-Liners. So Letterboxd, of course, it's a place for film lovers to congregate, to talk with and to each other about the films they love. Maybe the films that they didn't love. Maybe the films they.
My daughter's all over Letterboxd. Yeah,
it's great. I'm all about it. I brought it to this show. I again, accept no substitutes. This bit comes from me on this show and nowhere else. Often imitated, never perfected.
Sometimes by Letterboxd itself.
Exactly. Put them on blast. But, everyone gets to have their say. It's a bottom-up democracy. That's why I like it, right? Everybody, it's not just the Siskel's and Eberts of the world. Everybody gets to opine and chime in about whatever they're seeing, whether it's the first time, whether it's the 1,000th time. And, of course, every week, usually for one movie, I collect a number of these reviews together that are, everything's best expressed succinctly. You keep it short. It's like a tight 5. You don't want to write a treatise. You don't want to write a Unabomber style manifesto. We're not looking at the Silmarillion here. Hello, Silmarillion. Is this thing on? But then we put them together.
Please don't adapt that.
Don't adapt the Silmarillion. No, it's not great. We put them on the screen, read them off, react to them, laugh at them, do what thou wilt. We're going to do that for all 3 Lord of the Rings movies. These are the Letterboxd One-Liners for Lord of the Rings. Let's go, Forrest.
There's actually 300 of these. It's kind of crazy.
My biggest takeaway from all this is that Gandalf is a stoner.
Yeah, he was smoking that leaf.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Straight up. Yeah.
I always assumed that was closer to
giggly when he gets later.
After watching it again this time, I don't know.
He was just lost, and he came back as Gandalf. He's like, I didn't know where you guys were.
You'll never believe the edibles that I got down at the bottom of this fucking place. It's crazier than just smoking
it. Can we just say go back for a second for us? Yeah. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, this movie single-handedly let marijuana become legalized in this country, I believe.
this was it, right? By the way, love the tag. Chilling with friends is a tag, and edibles is a tag.
And the Ents were growing it for sure.
Oh yeah, they were.
They were just
lie, you fools! Blaze it, 420.
Oh, yeah.
I like Gandalf. I like Gandalf.
And whenever you put white in front of a chain, it'll make it way stronger.
Like Gandalf is in a blunt rotation, and somebody's hogging the fucking, somebody's hogging the leaf, and he's like, "You shall not pass."
Ah, there it is. There it is.
Mm-hmm. That is on a lot of Stoner memorabilia.
Sometimes a fellowship is just 6 himbos, 2 daddies, and a Gimli.
Yeah.
Ah.
There's other ways to break down the racial components of the people of Middle Earth, but that works as well as any.
A bunch of little guys running around.
I mean, some
Not wrong.
but also some tall guys running around.
Some other stuff happens too, but that's accurate assessment.
Gandalf gets high as fuck, and they lose him. They lose him on the journey.
They lose him. Actual dream blunt rotation.
You shall not pass.
That's why I was laughing at that. Earlier, I knew this was coming.
Prescient.
Your love of the halfling's leaf has clearly slowed your mind. I've seen this movie countless times. How am I just now realizing that Saruman is basically calling Gandalf a dumb stoner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On to Two Towers now. Gandalf's return makes me want to burst through a brick wall like I was the Kool-Aid man.
Dude, it's so crazy though. I mean, I'm not gonna play the clip of Gandalf coming back, but
it's pretty hot. It's pretty hot. It's good
but
stuff.
It's so crazy. Like when he rips off his fucking robe, like that's such a crazy moment because he's like, look, it's Gandalf the Grey. Look at him, he's all gray, and nobody gives a fuck about this guy. And then he's like, Gandalf the Grey, and he's like, fuck, it's Gandalf the White.
Exactly. It took me 7 viewings to work out why this film is called Two Towers.
Lord of the Rings and the Twin Towers.
Oh, bless.
I'm not gonna lie. I didn't really think about it. I don't know, for whatever reason. I've read the books 4 or 5 times. I've seen these movies at least a dozen times each. I never actually thought too much about it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess there are 2 towers.
I like that. I like that each movie kind of references it references the title. Like Saruman gives the speech where he's like, I'm one tower and Sauron's the other tower. We're the 2 towers. It's like, and then later I'm not gonna let the king just return. And I'm like, and they're like, oh, I guess you got a fellowship. And I'm like, yeah.
All I know is that Treebeard.
You need it, otherwise you get movies like Long Legs where there are no long legs.
That's true. It's not. It's the opposite of truth in advertising.
All I know where you stretch out of your seat and walk out.
All I know is that Treebeard is the worst shepherd of the forest. If he didn't even know Saruman killed half of Fangorn. You know what? Facts.
Yeah, they're trying to get him to turn on Saruman. He's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think about it. I gotta speak it in Ent and talk to my people about it. It's like he's clearly chopping you guys down.
Yeah, couldn't they hear him all screaming?
Right. No, it's very
Well, a scream is so quick. Like that's not Intish because they take so long to say things.
They're too busy saying good morning.
This is I think somebody's getting cut down.
I'd become a villain too if my parents named me Smeagol.
I love the line. Can't you see he's a villain? And then I was like, yeah, he is. Frodo can't see it though. Frodo's afraid that he's gonna be Smeagol, so it's like,
right there you go.
I think he did a wonderful job of bringing some sympathy and a persona to Smeagol Gollum.
I was rooting for Smeagol. I was not rooting for Gollum.
Inside Ear 2 Hobbits. Saruman, turn the orb on. Doesn't matter which channel.
Have you not looked at the orb all day? There's so much crazy shit going on. And he's like, fuck.
There's a new season of one of the Walking Dead shows, I think. I don't know. Too much big spider. That's the Return of the King.
So Peter Jackson is apparently an arachnophobe, and he's
never enough.
You're like an arachno booster.
It's like I'm not an arachnophobe. I'm not afraid of them.
Yeah.
I just wish I wish they'd stop pushing their lifestyle on me.
Perfect movie, especially because all movies need 9 Indians.
It's such a cool scene.
Yes.
He has to count the endings off on his fingers by the end of it.
Jesus.
Oh, come on. Wouldn't it be nice if every time you were feeling down, Cate Blanchett would suddenly appear to encourage you and lift you up?
Which Cate Blanchett? Because none of it's Lydia Tarr.
Or the angry, Cate Blanchettness is scary as hell.
She is super scary when she,
goes dark mode.
Yeah. And then she's like, but I'm just playing. It's all good. Go ahead.
I passed the test.
I'm just imagining like being severely depressed and then having Lydia Tarr appear. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to get so much worse, isn't it?
to be fair, let me go on record as saying I'm totally down almost any version of Cate Blanchett. Thank you.
For sure.
It's nice that all the kingdoms are wheelchair accessible, just in case.
Yeah. Well, you never know. You never know who's going to be the steward. Well, if he was steward in your kingdom, right? Like, it's not a king. He has to make it wheelchair accessible. I feel like
exactly.
He has to kind of case out the people, right? Like, like if he loses the handicapped citizens of Gondor, it's like he's lost probably a fair amount.
He's a good leader, but he's ableist. Okay. That's how you become the last steward of Gondor. Thank you.
Look at this Palantir. Look at this Palantir post that he had 10 years ago.
The Hobbits coming home to the Shire to no one really giving a shit is exactly what coming home from tour feels like. Boom!
Bravo.
Knockout blow. That's my buddy James from The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. Credit where credit's due. We speak his name. Those are Letterboxd one-liners for The Lord of the Rings. All 3 movies. Yes, I made the bit harder somehow. You can follow the show on Letterboxd at Movie Night Extra, Letterboxd HQ account, where we're covering all the many episodes we do. We're doing stories, we're doing reviews, lots of extra materials, including actually our Alex Cox interview. Got to put that up. Have not put that up yet. So follow that account on Letterboxd, please, if you like the movies and you like the Letterboxd. No Kingdom for Old Men over there. At Always Flacco Forrest. He's your host. You can follow him, see all his thoughts on the many movies that we cover, and so much more. I am the Horn of Neutron, at Conan Neutron. I am on Letterboxd. Exactly. And I am covering the highbrow, the midbrow, the populist fare, all the stuff. I'll move for the Criterion Challenge, Film School Dropouts Challenge. I am on there at Conan Neutron. Currently, my Wolverine versus Deadpool review appears to be insanely popular. I don't understand why, but that's fine. Happy for it.
When I was a kid, by the way, after watching the Boromir scene, I really, really wanted a horn, and so I got one. I have one made out of bone somewhere upstairs, and that you can actually.
And you didn't bring it down for the show? Amazing!
I don't know where it is, and it's probably so fucking covered in dust right now. That
Friday.
If only you could blow a horn of Gondor to find your horn of Gondor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't dig up all my swag, but I thought I would share this with you.
Oh, whoa, hold on. All right,
check that jacket out. It's like a full long
Oh,
wow!
The gates of
hell yeah! That is awesome.
This is like one of a kind Weta, because they were like,
look at that! Look at that! It's even
everybody. And this is supposed to be there, but I was like, no, put it on the sleeve. That'll be cooler.
Even if you're not like KT and didn't go see the Hobbiton on your honeymoon, like it says Lord of the Rings, so you know what it's from.
That's right.
Speak, friend, and enter.
J. Andrew World over there. The visual element kind of blows my mind. The 111th ending is on Letterboxd as well at right about now. 2. Log in all the weird stuff so you don't have to. I saw Time Bandits on there. I saw yet another Doctor Who episode. You were specifically referencing me, so that's why I saw it. I'm not here to judge what you're watching, but he's doing all the weird stuff over there. Enough said.
He's doing the weird stuff over there.
KT, our friend KT, yay! At Movie Runtime, she's on Letterboxd. Her account is amazing. It's one of my favorites. Except for if it's a link to TikTok, which I do not click because I don't look at TikTok. But the rest of it's great.
Try and trick you and make you do it.
I know you keep tricking me, and I keep falling
Sometimes
for it.
I just put the transcript of the TikTok up there, and I make you read a TikTok. Ha
I don't appreciate your tricksy nature, ma'am.
KT did a really amazing video on TikTok of like the history of Massive that yesterday.
Oh, cool.
Not actually knowing that that's the part of the the software that Mike had worked on either.
Oh, cool! I have to go see it. Although I don't do TikTok either. I do have it though because my kids forced me to have it.
She posted on Instagram too. So there you go. Mike, I know you're not on Letterboxd.
I know. I want Conan to see it.
I'll check that out. I know you're not on Letterboxd. I don't think you want to narc out your child, but if you do want to shout it out, otherwise we'll just go to the regular.
If I am, I'll just be at Mike Morasky. It's what I do everywhere.
You should. You know who's on there? I'm not trying to entice you, but maybe I am. Rick Valentin.
Oh well, yeah. No, now I have to be on there.
Exactly. You could be like one of you'd be his sixth follow. I was his fifth.
I thought about it, but I feel like I just have to sit. It'd take me like weeks of going. I've seen that movie. I've seen that movie.
So it is a dangerous road to walk. First of all, more dangerous than the actual Fellowship ever walked. But for me, what hooked me was the watch list feature because I always be like, oh yeah, what's the thing I need to see? Christ, what was that called? And then like, whatever. Here I am, all these years later. What a true success story. All right, let's hit the plugs.
All right. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and then hit the bell to get notified whenever we're streaming. And we'd humbly request that you watch the video to the end because it helps us with the algorithm and helps more film fans to discover the show. We're also monetized. If you want to get your chat questions definitely read on stream, you can always send us a super chat, which will help us keep the show going. Every cent helps. If you're watching on Twitch, you can gift us a free sub on Amazon Prime with your Prime membership, but getting subs on Twitch is always appreciated, and it helps to follow us on there as well. We also have an audio feed, which is available wherever you download podcasts, if you prefer to listen to podcasts rather than watch the stream. That's updated usually the same day we stream, but watching on YouTube and Twitch is the best way to get the show first, live as it happens. If you want to support us with a monthly donation and get access to all of our after parties forever, which go patron only after we do them, you can become a patron at patreon.com/movie night extra. Link is in the description for that. It really helps us keep the show going since we do have some expenses to make this happen. We also have a Discord community. Link is in the description for that. We sometimes watch movies we cover on there. We get into conversations about everything from film to TV shows to related podcasts. We even have a Discord channel for memes. It's really fun on there. You can find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, and Threads. You connect with us on all of those. Talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. Lastly, we recently made a TikTok at Movie Night Extra where we're putting up short form clips from the episodes. Okay, passing this to Conan so he can tell you about his music and this week's Protonic Reversal. Conan, who's on Protonic this week?
Oh, damn. All right. I'm still getting used to this new format. Chris Haskett of Rollins Band coming in, which I'm super excited about. I love that dude's work, and it's been a long road to make that happen. That's coming up this Thursday. Still have the Spencer Hazard of Full of Hell interview that actually just went up the general feed this week. We actually, for the film lovers, we talk about all the Full of Hell stuff in the Riley Stearns movies, like Art of Self-Defense and Duel and stuff like that. Really interesting cat. Awesome stuff. Secret Friends. Let's see. September 19th, I believe. Bottom of the Hill with Kingdom First and Antler Family. So that should be good. Mike Morasky will be there. Why aren't you? People are asking this more and more. Then we're doing Los Angeles. Actually, we're doing San Pedro and Phoenix and somewhere else. I can't remember. But anyway, whatever. NeutronFriends.bandcamp.com for all that. The official announcement for all that stuff and the tour posters coming up soon. Adult Prom still available. Our Split with Lung. Mike knows it. Mike knows all about it. He played the XF show with us last time.
I love Lung.
They're so great. They're so awesome. I think that is it for me.
Okay, KT, how's What If I Don't Like It going, and how's your TikTok going? Anything to look out for on there?
I'm doing a bunch of other podcasts. I was on Backlook Cinema talking about Repo Man. And then I'm also talking about the history of the MPAA and its current implications on Trashwire, which will be coming out in about a week. So I'm bopping all around. And then our next What If I Don't Like It will be Jingle All the Way.
I mean, great. Looks good on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't
We're
seem
going
like-
to
it
do
doesn't seem like a
Christmas
movie
in
that-
August.
It's hard to like pitch that one. I feel like to somebody who isn't like Schwarzenegger pilled.
You know, I didn't pitch it. It was
like you're looking at me.
It was pitched backwards to me. No, the guest said that they didn't like a single thing by this director, and we're gonna try and find something. And this was the like one saving grace I could kind of find, because he also did like the sequel to Flintstones. Like, it's not a good situation here.
Wait, Viva Rock Vegas?
Yeah, is there another one? That's the only one I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Viva Rock Vegas. I think they made another.
Mike, KT has a great show.
That one with a friend of mine from TikTok.
She does a show. It's called What If I Don't Like It, where the conceit of it is that the guest is challenged to engage with a film that, for whatever reason, they never saw, for whatever number of reasons, and then there's a piece before and after it, whereas before they watch it and then after they watch it. I've been on twice, one as a guest and the other to turn the tables on KT, where I showed her Network, which is one of my favorite movies.
Oh,
of all time.
That's so good. Such an amazing film.
And she's definitely Network pilled now.
Some of you guys,
yeah, I didn't have
you guys both.
Crap. Yeah.
You guys both didn't mention Conan. You're going on the Letter Hacks.
Tomorrow. I forgot about that. Yeah.
KT was just on there for an interview. What, last week, 2 weeks ago?
That's right. So Letter Hack, friend of the show, Letter Hack.
Yeah.
Left After 10 is the name of the show, right? So I'm coming. I don't know. What's that gonna be like? I don't know.
It's him and I was on there. I was on there a couple of weeks ago, and I had a good time.
Yeah, I'm sure it's gonna be great. There's another episode of the show I do with Jason about the different music years. Christ, what did we do this time? I don't even remember. 80.
Was it 1982? Was it
82?
Or was it 86?
82 or 83? I don't remember. But we're doing. There's another one of those coming up. Wow, this is some promo section. I can't remember anything about what I'm doing. Great, but that's the one where I literally just show up and like just do the thing I would normally do anyway. So whatever. But this is Revolution. Those shows are a good time.
And
All right, Caterwall 2025.
2025 is what we're talking about at this point. Yeah,
The real project 2025.
The real project 2025 is getting. I'm not going to say it.
We'll see what we can do.
All right.
Yeah. But Mike, do you have anything you want to plug, or Also, if there's anything
Project 20, he's plugging Project 2025. Yes.
To put in the description for the show too. If there's any.
Steel Ball Bathtub's playing some shows. Might be
Steel Ball
good idea to
Bathtub's
mention
playing
those.
some shows in the fall. Seattle, Vancouver, and Portland with Unwound in October 17, 18, 19. We're playing then 2nd and 3rd of November in Los Angeles and then San Diego. And then there's a couple other little ones that are going to pop up probably in the Bay Area because this is where we practice. So we might sneak a couple of small shows in just for fun. And then Cassette Prophet is playing at the Chapel in the Mission District of San Francisco.
I love that place.
On November, I don't remember, but it's like second week of November with Acid King, which will be really fun. Yeah.
Last show I saw there was Sparks, but it was just Ron and Russell.
Oh, wow.
And it was awesome. It
I
was
bet.
so great.
Just the two of them.
Just the two of them, but kicked ass.
So old school. Yeah. But that's about it. Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome to Shows I Saw by Conan Neutron.
But Andy has a book cover, right? A book cover that he wanted.
Yeah. Just the deal just kind of got signed and everything. But yeah, I got a book cover coming out from Everyday Analysis. is the name of the
I'm sorry.
Everyday
Take two.
analysis.
Try that again.
Everyday analysis.
There you go. Much better.
Yeah, there we go. Yes.
Once a week is enough for me.
But yeah, no, they have a book coming out by Ben Burgess with 4 essays on Palestine, and I did the cover for that. So be looking for an announcement on that.
Is the cover uploaded?
Yeah, the cover's done. I shared to you guys the cover in the chat.
No, I mean, is it on the Conan? Did you put it on the overlay, or is that something else? There's something that looks like the cover that I can't tell whether it is.
I don't.
Nope,
I didn't.
That's
I didn't
Wave
do.
Entertainment. Never mind.
I was gonna say that's probably my compilation. But but while we're talking about it, you pick that up. That's copy's still available on that.
but yeah, wait, hold on. I'll pull up.
Who puts out a comp in 2024? Me. That's who. It's great.
And a full album in 2025. That's the.
Oh my god, I know. At least I'm not putting the money in for the. There we go. Here it is. Seismic Waves Volume 1. Yeah, there you go. Forgot to plug it. See, this is Mike. The plugs look like this.
Consider plugged.
This is what the plugs look like on this show.
I was getting the dynamic from Andrew. Like, I shared it with you guys on the chat. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Why isn't that coming up on the screen?
That makes Andy sound way more Seinfeld than he is, though. I shared it on the chat, and everyone's like,
"What's the deal with the chat?
What's the deal? What's the deal with chat?"
We never know. Here it is. I'll pull it up. I thought it was. I don't know why. In my head, I thought we had it.
Yeah, I don't have access to it. So
I feel like we're doing the old plugs just after the new plugs. Okay, there it is. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Oh, nice.
Okay. It's very minimalist.
Anything else?
Yeah, they have all these like little logos, and so the challenge was to come up with something small, simple to put in the middle of the book like that.
All right.
It's great. It's very.
There you go.
Yeah. It's very. What's the word I'm looking for?
Very covery.
Elegant. Yeah.
Covery. Yeah.
It's very minimalist. I feel like that's the word.
Yeah. No, I mean, it looks like masking tape almost if you actually get to see it close up. So
yeah,
it's pretty rad.
That's cool.
All right.
But Mike, starting with you, final thoughts, anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to add or anything like that?
I mean, there's a ton that we didn't talk about, but there's probably, I think this is the end, or we could do another end and then another one too.
We could do a bunch of
several ends. No, I know. It was. Thank you for having me on, because I honestly, I don't really think about this hardly ever. Honestly.
You've done so much stuff that it's sort of like, oh yeah, remember we did that? Oh yeah, crazy.
I'm always kind of forward moving.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was fun to kind of go back and
We
like
should-
go
we should
through
do
the list
another-
of all the crew, and you know what I mean, like remember all the people. And
Yeah, we should do another one of these soon at some point.
Yeah,
we could do the Matrix trilogy.
That's true. You did work on those.
I would
as well.
be down for that, just for the talk about that freeway race chase scene. Oh my god!
I've told a story about how I freaking accidentally like wandered into that shooting, right? Like when they were shooting that, like I was trying to get to my practice space that I used to like same building Jason was in, and like I came out the freeway. I'm like, what the fuck? It's shut down. All I'm trying to do is play this rock and roll. Like, what's going on? And I'm sitting there. I'm like annoyed.
Roll.
I'm sitting there. I'm like annoyed. I'm like, what's happening? And then I'm like, what is even like? What do we stop for? What's happening? And then it's like, boom, truck, boom, another truck, people fighting on it, boom, third truck with like cameras. I'm like, holy shit, what the hell is happening? And then they're like, all right, you can go now. And then I continued on my way to Soundwave Studios.
I haven't seen this many people fighting on trucks since I lived in New Jersey.
But it was crazy because I had no idea what it was, and then I was like, "Oh yeah, they were shooting like some Matrix sequels like down the street." I'm like, "Oh, I think I like accidentally ran into it." But I was stopped for like 10 minutes. I was actually kind of bummed out by it because I was like, "All I want to do is go to practice, man."
We need Andrew Dice Conan as a character. Like
I told you we met that dude on tour,
Yeah.
right? Whatever. That's a different. Yeah. That's after classic after party material. Anyway, moving on. Yeah. Yeah. So
KT, final thoughts. KT.
Oh, you're on. You muted KT.
I'm muted because I'm having cats that are actively fighting in the background. There's like growling noises. I'm trying not to contribute to the conversation.
Well, they're having their own Helm's Deep over there.
But my final thoughts. Exactly, 100%. My final thought is simply that it's impressive how the books themselves dictate what would be fantasy going forward, and then these films, they could easily be like The Dark Towers, a major misstep in something that is such a big fandom, and then like they wind up dictating what becomes how films like this are filmed. And it's amazing that it would wind up doing that twice. It's so cool.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I didn't hear any cats fighting, by the way. So you did a good job with it.
I know. Well, they're about to knock over a Lego version of the Hogwarts Owlery, and it's gonna be bad.
It'll be a real Lego loss.
All right, there he is, everybody. Andy World. He'll be here all week. Tip your bartenders.
That's too much Andy for even the first half. No, Andy, final thought. Now that you're,
I was watching this. So my kid was on the couch, and I go, "That's the first like computer generated character, like main character in a movie." My kid's like, "That looks pretty good. When did this movie come out?" So that is like a testament to how well this movie stands the test of time. That it's still in a HD version of it too, because we got one of those nice new TVs, not like the old days when we're watching on like an old CRT screen where you can hide a lot.
Commodore 64, yeah.
Critical race theory screen. Is that what that is?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
I have no idea if that's in reference to Thomas. I'm sorry, but it probably wasn't George Miller.
George Miller's Lord of the Rings would not have been as good.
Very different.
But man, the cars would be amazing. Yeah. Anyway, but the fact that
5 minutes because Frodo and Sam could have just driven there.
There's a Reddit thread about it, I'm sure. Move on. Anyway.
Yeah, no. But the fact is that here's a movie that came out over 20 years ago, set the standard, stepped up in quality of visuals from what we're used to, and still looks good. And that is something to say about this work. And that's beyond talk about the story, which I think we're going to dig into next time.
Yep,
that's right. We are not done yet at all.
Conan, you have your flawlessly scripted final thoughts.
Yeah. Greatest fantasy adventure movies of all time? Yes.
All right. We'll be back on Friday with a part 2 of this. Mike, thanks so much for coming on. This was awesome. This was great.
Thank you.
Everybody was loving this conversation.
It was...